call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Here.
Counselor Lavin?
I'm here.
Counselor Peeler?
Here.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Here.
Counselor Gilat? Counselor Petropoulos?
Here.
Counselor Morocco?
Here.
Counselor Whitfield?
Here.
Mayor Valentino?
Here. Thank you. Next is a public hearing. We're going to start with the 2025 budget. I have two people signed up, but the mic will be open after that. First I have is Cassie Snyder.
Hi. I'm Cassie J. Snyder. I live in Ward 2. I attended the last budget hearing, and I had two ideas that came from that. The first is that a large percentage of the budget goes to city employee salary and benefits. Statistically, 68 cents of every dollar that a person makes is spent local to where they live. It would make sense, given that the large percentage of the city's income comes from property tax and sales tax, for there to be the creation of some kind of long-term like incentivizing of city employees to live in the city of Geneva instead of the town or any surrounding area. So that just to me seemed like an easy, slow burn kind of solution to getting more income. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is I'm on the city flooding task force, and a lot of what we are working on is the success of the program is predicated on public education and making sure that people are aware of what they can do to help the efforts of DPW and what they could also do at home to prevent any sort of long-term issues on their property. There's also the idea that like we need to let people know what's being done for maintenance and creating kind of like a long-term mapping program. But the public's not going to know about that without something like a community engagement coordinator. And it would be great if that was built into the budget so that the efforts of the flooding task force aren't just in vain, because it's a lot of work by a lot of people, and there's some really great ideas coming out of that task force, but it's not going to do anything if we're not able to tell people about that effectively. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next I have Cyril Smith. I hope I'm saying Cyril right. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Good evening. I'm Cy Smith. I live at 839 South Main Street.
Cy, may I ask you to try to speak more to the microphone
Okay.
so the people that are
Can
on.
you hear
Thank
me?
you very much. Perfect. Perfect.
All right. The reason I'm here is to talk about what we call a baseline budget, a budget that's a lot more reasonable than the proposed budget that you have before you. The background of this is that the reassessment that took place earlier this year went from a equation tax to a market tax, equalized tax to a market tax. And The result was almost a 50% increase in assessed values, 488 million to 727. But the important thing is, nothing really changed. There was no expansion of the tax base. The only thing that happened was your house, my house, they all had different price or assessed valuation tags on it. The only thing that changed was the reallocation among homeowners of the tax based on how much their assessment increased. And that was it. But there was no requirement for the city to expand its services. There was no additional investment required. It was the same housing stock, day one, day two, just had a different tag. When we look at the proposed budget, which increases the city's tax levy from 8.4 million to 10.16 million, that's a 21% tax increase. That's almost 10 times the current rate of inflation. The most recent rate of inflation, 2.2%, announced last month by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Now, I say it's imprudent, but you don't have to take my word for it. Look at what the state requires. To pass this budget, you're going to have to break the property tax cap. And if you look at the agenda, a meeting is going to be scheduled, a public hearing on breaking the tax. So I think that right away there are some red flags that are being raised about this budget. Not just from the citizens, but just from the point of view of what the state normally requires. Councilman Lavin has been a leader in analyzing this and raising highly appropriate questions about what is the purpose of this budget. He's introduced a resolution that will be up for consideration later to reduce have a budget that reduces the levy from by exactly $2 million from 10.16 million down to 8.16. So in the spirit of that approach, what we've done is take what we call, and we refers to my better half, Cam and I, a baseline budget. A baseline budget, we said, what would be a reasonable approach? Now, each of us has spent over 30 years prior to our respective retirements as public finance attorneys. So budgets, tax caps, and things like that are things that we used to have to deal with. And we thought that a tax levy increase of 3.5%, which is over 1.3 percentage points greater than the rate of inflation. We felt, based on our experience, that any city manager in New York, in this type of environment where inflation has come down, could easily produce a workable budget with a 3.5% increase in tax levy. It gives a tremendous cushion over the inflation rate. Now, it happens that if we proceed along the math of a 3.5% tax levy increase, that the tax rate drops to, the millage drops to 11.96. And we look at the median valuation, 143,900,000 that the city manager has calculated. It would, their tax at the median level would drop about 14% from 2,025 to 1,722, over $300. And my estimate And obviously you'd need a spreadsheet, which I'm sure the city manager has. But my estimate is that well over half of the city homeowners would have significant tax reductions based upon their prior taxes under the reassessment. Under the baseline budget, those homeowners who had significantly greater increases in their assessments would bear a higher tax. In our case, for our residents, our tax increase would be about 7.5%, a little more than 3 times the rate of inflation. That's the result of our property being reassessed at a greater percentage increase than the average or the median. And while 3%, while 7.5% increase is quite large, it's a lot better than the proposed tax that would come under the proposed budget. That would have been over 10 times the rate of inflation. Now, that concludes my presentation, but I'd like to just add one point. I saw in the paper this morning that the Economic Development Director has presented a new plan. And the plan, among other things, is intended to increase the city's tax base and draw in private investors, both for development of new housing stock and commercial properties. So let me just tell you, based on my 30 years of experience in economic development, working with municipal governments, not just in New York, but across the country, a 21% increase in the tax levy is not going to fly. Something along the baseline budget, that's fine. But I would say that you're putting yourself out of business for any kind of economic development for a generation if you proceed along the lines of a 21% tax increase. When we bought our residence over 25 years ago, we made an analysis of the tax situation, the economic development going on. We even had the tax assessor take a look at what we thought was non-living space that was included in the assessment base, and got a commitment that when the next reassessment came up, they would make an adjustment for that. We were private citizens. Think about how a company would do an analysis. Once you've done this, you can't take it back. You can't hide it. All you've done is increase your tax base, and everyone will see it. And I can tell you that any company that I dealt with in a situation like this would say, look, there are plenty of other places where we can invest our funds where they have a stable baseline approach. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to state my views.
So we're on the public hearing for the budget. Would anybody else like to approach the podium? Okay, we'll call that public hearing closed. And the next public hearing is for the amending levels of real property tax exemptions for senior citizens. I don't have anybody signed up, but is anybody interested in speaking to that public hearing? If not, we will close that public hearing. And next on our agenda is proclamations. I better get them in order. Figures would be the last one I picked up. So the first proclamation I have is for Extra Mile Day. Whereas Geneva, New York is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort volunteerism, and service. And whereas Geneva, New York is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas Geneva, New York is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make the difference and lift up fellow members in their community. And whereas Geneva, New York acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 550 extra mile cities in America, is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2024. Now, therefore, I, Steve Valentino, Mayor of the City of Geneva, New York, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2024 to be Extra Mile Day. I urge individuals in the community to take the time on this day to not only go the extra mile in his or her own life, but to also acknowledge also the inspirational in their efforts and commitment to make their organizations, families, community, and country and world a better place. The next proclamation is Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the National Fire Prevention Association and local fire departments are celebrating 102 years of Fire Prevention Week. This year's theme is smoke alarms. Make them work for you. The firefighters across the country working to educate citizens about simple but important actions they can take to install and maintain working smoke alarms. And whereas roughly 3 out of 5 fire deaths happen in homes where either no smoke alarm or non-working smoke alarms. And whereas the fire department encourages all residents to install smoke alarms in every bedroom, outside the separate sleeping area, and on each level of the home, test smoke alarms at least once a month by pushing the test button, and replace smoke alarms when they are 10 years old or don't respond to the test. And whereas during Fire Prevention Week, the Geneva Fire Department reaffirms their commitment to raising awareness about fire safety and prevention. We salute our firefighters who demonstrate the true meaning of heroism by taking risks to safeguard our community, and also pay special tribute to those firefighters who are no longer with us, including those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Steve Valentino, Mayor of the City of Geneva, New York, do hereby proclaim the week of October 6th through October 12th, 2024 as Fire Prevention Week in the City of Geneva, and urge our citizens to participate in fire prevention activities at home, work, and school by being cognizant that the fire safety starts with you. And our last proclamation will be for the Smith Opera House. Whereas the Smith Opera House was constructed in 1894, it's celebrating its 130th birthday this year. The Smith was named for William Smith, who was a major benefactor to the creation of the Opera House. And whereas the Smith Opera House opened on October 29th, 1894, on that day, Count of Monte Cristo was shown starring James O'Neill, fathering of playwright Eugene O'Neill, who was in the audience. And notable performances over the years include Thomas Edison's Taking Picture, demonstrated in only 18 theaters nationwide, Frank Zappa, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, 10,000 Maniacs, Fish, Mary Chapin Carpenter, and many more. Whereas the Smith Opera House has brought various cultural diverse programs to the community throughout its history and continues to do so today. The Smith boasts the biggest movie screens in the Finger Lakes region and is operated by 3 different names throughout its rich history. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Steve Valentino, in my capacity as Mayor of the City of Geneva, do hereby proclaim October 29, 2024 as Smith Opera House Day in the City of Geneva, and urge all residents to join me in honoring the Smith Opera House's 130th birthday celebration. I do have one other citation, and I'm going to hold it up. This was presented by Senator Helming, at our 9/11 ceremony, and I'll read it very quickly. This citation recognizing the city of Geneva upon the occasion of Patriots' Day service in remembrance of the September 11th, 2024. On this Patriot Day, we gather to remember our fellow Americans lost in 9/11 and reaffirm our vow to never forget their lives or their sacrifice. We express our deepest honor and respect for the service of our firefighters, law enforcement, EMS, and military service members, those who gave their lives and those who continue to serve our families, communities, and nation today. Now, therefore, be it recognized that I, Senator Pam Helming, have commended the City of Geneva on this Patriot Day for its commitment to honoring those we have lost and all those who have served, for its own commitment to serving others. We will never forget. Thank you, Senator Helming. Next, we move on to a presentation or overview of overtime reporting. Chief Evelyn, Chief Parada, and Director Venuti.
And actually, Lieutenant Bielowitz is filling in for Chief Evelyn, who is out of town at a conference. So they have provided on the desks an overtime report that gives information on that. There's also some copies available, I think, next to our legal as well. This was something that was requested by council, but I think one of the big pieces is we can give you kind of a monthly or quarterly update of what we're spending on overtime. But the big piece on that, and why I've had all three departments here, is to discuss what we use overtime for and how overtime is used as a tool. So I'm going to go off the report and put the lieutenant up first to talk a little bit about why his department uses overtime, what it looks like so far this year, and then how this tool is utilized. Go ahead, Lieutenant.
All right, broke down overtime, the way we use it. We have court. If an officer goes to court, they can opt to take either comp time or overtime. They get paid out for that. They get a minimum of 3 hours straight time for that. We do call out. It's if you're at home or if you're off duty, you get called. If you come in, you get 4 hours of straight time. It also, the guys use it if they call either the two officers that speak Spanish, if they call them off duty to translate for them. Hobart, William Smith, we just started doing an overtime detail in the college area due to the numerous complaints we were getting about large parties and open containers. So we just started doing that. We also do special events. The ones that we did last month were all school-based, and that's all reimbursed, or not reimbursed, it's all averaged in with the money that we get for the grant for the school resource officers. We also have a portion of that, we do traffic. The officer is required to come in and write at least a ticket an hour. And at the end of the year, which in the year it's from October to September, then we put in for reimbursement and we get that reimbursed. There's also complaint holdover overtime. So if an officer if they're working 3 to 11 at 10 o'clock, if they get a call that involves like a further follow-up or an arrest, they got to process them. It would go past their shift or their end of their shift, and they would get overtime for that. But the major one that we've been working through is the shift shortage overtime. There is an end in sight. We just had one of the 4 recruits get off FTO, and he's on his own. And we anticipate 3 more getting off in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then hopefully that will cure the officer overtime. But the command staff overtime is still going to be an issue because we're only working with 4 sergeants until we get the results back for the civil service test, which should be hopefully any day now because they took the test in June 4th, and it's been 4 months. So we're just anticipating hopefully any day now to make a promotion, and that would take care of most of the command staff overtime.
And FTO is field training. So when our officers come back from academy, they're not full officers, and so they go through FTO time.
Yes.
Lots of acronyms between these 3 departments. So,
Thank you, Lieutenant Bielowitz.
and then let's go over to fire. Chief.
Thank you. Good evening. Much like the police department, we do have a minimum 4-hour callback time in the collective bargaining agreement. So a lot of things, even if it might take an hour or two, the collective bargaining agreement requires a 4-hour minimum. So Things we call in overtime for, we use overtime for, would be shift coverage, minimum manning, or if somebody's out ill or injured. Emergency incident callback. If we have a large-scale incident, such as our most recent flooding, we'll have to call members back, or if there's a large-scale fire, we'll call members back to duty for that. Training sometimes uses our overtime as well. When they attend training outside of their normal duty schedule, they'll be on overtime. Special events, cruising night, muscle man, or Iron Man, I should say. Backfilling if we are below minimum staffing uses overtime. Sometimes our apparatus maintenance, we have crews that can come in and do some of the work that's in their scope, and it saves us money. Even though we're generating overtime, it saves us money on our apparatus maintenance because we don't have to call in an outside company to do that for us. Community outreach programs and public education, we'll have staff go out and teach CPR and other medical programs or fire safety programs to companies or nonprofits. That'll generate overtime for us. Some of their mandatory in-service training requires them to be on overtime. Any type of standbys if we anticipate a major emergency or inclement weather. And then there's other things in the collective bargaining agreements that requires them to be on overtime.
All right, thanks, Chief. And then I'm going to go over to DPW. Now, DPW is a little different with their overtime because overtime is split among different funds. And so we have general fund dollars, and then we have our sewer and our water fund. And so when overtime exists in water or wastewater, that goes through the sewer and the water funds. And then buildings and grounds and highway would go through our general fund. So four different categories, but are all through 2 collective bargaining agreements. Director Venuti?
Yes, thank you, City Manager. Good evening. Very similar to what we've just heard from both commands and fire, we also have the collective bargaining agreements. There are 2 specific articles which regulate the overtime or compensation payments. We're based at DPW on a 40-hour week, 8-hour-a-day scenario. The contracts do allow for the overtime. However, it's not mandatory to come in. So I want to be clear that sometimes we call staff to come in and they can refuse it. If it's an emergency situation, we can mandate that they come in and our team responds well in that time frame. Our water and wastewater treatment plants and maintenance often need to come in to do emergency work or scheduled shutdown work. We have to follow the regulations of the Environmental Protection Agency, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as the Department of Health. Each of those groups have significant regulations that require daily laboratory testing, monitoring, and reporting. So we work weekends and holidays of scheduled events. The highway and buildings and grounds team, our staff supports planned community events. We do street cleaning, we do debris pickup, we do snow plowing and de-icing. We have cemetery and park preparations along with burials and cremations that are often on overtime. Unscheduled circumstances for us would be, for each department, extreme weather emergencies, equipment failures, operational alarms by our supervisory control and data acquisition. Our SCADA alarm system is set up so we don't have to plan the staff, have staff at the plants 24/7. We all are connected to it by our cell phones and computers. So call comes in at 2 in the night for an alarm, we respond to it that way. Those regulations and compliance is mandatory that we respond. As far as the general fund crew, public health concerns, utility failures, unsafe pedestrian or traffic situations, or any building service failures, will call us in.
Thank you. And so on the overtime, there's also discussion about reimbursement, and all 3 of them mentioned there are some things that we do get reimbursed for. So in reimbursement for police, that's where we fall into Stop DWI grant programs. We fall into some events. Hobart William Smith has a reimbursement contract. Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Not going to use that acronym right now. That's another one where we get reimbursement on that. For fire, again, overtime for events. We get some events, not all events, and we do not have anything written into our events policies right now. It's something we can look at. And then Public Works, we have a user agreement with Henkel, and then we are right now, and Director Venuti's been working on FEMA to approve. We have 2 designated disasters that have been declared, and so we'll submit for overtime expenses during those. So there are some reimbursements on overtime that are also reflected there. And then I'm going to turn it over to this team again to kind of talk about when overtime is called, who determines that, and I'm going to go backwards this time. Joe was waiting for that. And then what other tools you have. So one of the things that I will caution council on, when you look at this, you'll see some of our overtime budgets look really nice right now. It looks like we're only used about half of our budget on some of these. There's another tool called comp time, and when comp time isn't used as comp time, how that is used. So Joe, I'll start it off with you on who determines and talk a little bit about your other tool, which is comp time.
Thank you. As your director of the Public Works, I communicate daily with the plant operators and the supervisors to determine if overtime authorization is appropriate or not. Consideration is given to restricting the authorization to an emergency situation or not, and whether or not we can defer it and have less or significant consequence if we let things go, so to speak. The plant staff has very capable chief operators, and the staff take direction from the chief operators. The maintenance staff also have capable supervisors, and their workers take direction from them.
All right, let's go over to the fire chief.
Yeah, so determination of overtime is typically established by a chief officer, myself, a deputy chief, or an assistant chief. We do have several policies in place that have automatic overtime built in. For instance, if we have 5 or more storm calls come in at the same time, it'll automatically generate a certain level of staffing to be recalled to the station. In addition to that, we have an automatic callback for any type of working structure fire. We'll automatically generate a certain amount of firefighters without having to be called in. And they are always used. There's never been a time that they've been called in and not used. So,
The use of overtime is usually either the chief of police, myself, or a sergeant, and that has to mostly do with shift coverage and staffing minimums. As of right now, our unwritten policies, we run with on days we run with 1 sergeant and 2 officers on the road. Afternoons we run with 1 sergeant and 3 officers on the road, and nights we run with 1 sergeant and 2 officers on the road. Unless it's Friday and Saturday night, then we make it a minimum 3 until like 3 to 4 a.m. What's the other question you were asking?
Comp time. How does comp time work, and how do you use that tool? The other 2 forgot, so thank you.
So if an officer works beyond their 8.5-hour shift, they can either elect to take overtime or comp time. And that goes into the comp bank, and at the end of the year, I believe they're only allowed to roll over 10 hours a year. So if they have like 20 hours and they don't use it, then I think they pay them out for the 10, and then they roll the 10 over automatically.
Correct.
A lot of that is based on, like I said, shift minimums. A lot of the guys can't take they take comp time, but then they can't use it because there's not enough people on the road to use comp time. Like I said, hopefully with all the guys, the 4 getting cut loose here shortly, hopefully that will eliminate that, and guys will start using it instead of cashing it in, which I'm sure that's what you guys want to do.
All right. And Del, do you want to mention that you can't have comp time?
yeah, in the collective bargaining agreement, there is no comp time allowed, so it's an easy one for me.
DPW's 2 collective bargaining agreements both allow for compensation time, compensatory time. It's accrued and then used and then paid out at a rate of 1.5 times in lieu of overtime. The contracts do required to not maintain more than 40 hours. However, historically, with the amount of work, the amount of allowed time off, and the amount of time the crews need to be at the plants, that time is often paid out at the end of the year. But the contract does have language about that, to requested time as a lump sum payment versus unused time
Right.
wasted.
So the key with the comp time is we have to pay people for the hours that they worked, and how we do that is based on time off or a payment. And so when you look at your numbers right now, what's not factored into those numbers is the people that have comp time sitting in the bank that then will get that paid out at the end of the year. And I think that's all we have on overtime. Joe?
Just for Public Works, one thing that I've been proud of working on in the short few years I've been here is our overtime has decreased each calendar year since I've been here. So Mother Nature has a lot to do with that.
Counselor Lavin.
Gentlemen, thanks for coming here on a school night, and I appreciate the time. And I wouldn't presume to start trying to micromanage your department, certainly from my little seat here. But the council does have a responsibility for the overall stewardship and fiduciary responsibility of the city. I'm just curious as to what kind of reporting you need to put in after an overtime event has happened, how much detail, and who does that go to? It doesn't come to us.
But for my department, we track payroll on a 2-week time frame. So that gets documented by currently paper timesheets that are approved by the supervisor, then reviewed and approved by me, and then turned into HR through the assistant that I have in our office.
Does that report include the circumstances that was required? I'm not trying to get into the micro, but when I looked over.
It's often noted on there.
Yeah, when I looked over the number of people, there was in 2022, there was a police officer who made $210,000 on the year. We had 4 or 5 people who were making more than the city manager, and we were somewhere in the vicinity of 25 people making more than $100,000 in jobs that were, salaries were listed in the 60s and 70s. And from the point of view of the council's oversight is, do we have enough people to do the services that we're establishing? And if not, should we be having more people, because paying a time and a half for these things may not be the right thing? That's where I think council's job is, not to tell you how many people to have on the street at 3 in the morning necessarily. But would it be onerous to get a detailed overtime report that goes to the city manager and can be part of a monthly report to council, so we see whether it's weather or whether we should be having closer discussions with the county, the sheriff's department or the state police about more integration for some of the things that are forcing overtime here in the city?
Technical difficulties over here on moving the mouse, so it doesn't work, but that's okay, sorry.
Well, I can only speak for my department, Counselor. We talk about this often, especially at our plants, because there's 4 operators at the water treatment plant, and I think we're up to 9 at the wastewater plant. And the cost for more employees is more than just the hourly cost. You also have your benefit package, you have your retirement package and things of that nature. So it's often less expensive on my side to have the overtime or compensation time versus additional staffing. Every one of my departments would like more people, and that's a discussion to take further.
Yeah, and this is something actually the comptroller and I have already discussed, is what are the numbers, because it is something that I do look at regularly. The police department provides a lot of reporting that shows that is. I often hear from all three about when they're going to have overtime, or they let me know when they have overtime, what's going on, if it's an an extenuating circumstance. I don't hear every time that someone's on a call out and stays over, but often I do, because those are bigger incidents. So we've talked about what we can be able to provide in the future.
I think I can, a little bit of help there. I know that continually in previous years, we've had each one of these departments come to us as a council and request more support, more labor in their departments to be able to achieve the tasks in front of them. And we've tried to be conscious with adding labor as we can add labor. We like to fully staff and make it happen immediately, but that's just not something that, we don't have an open checkbook for that one.
And I think if not all of the departments, they have requested that labor, and I think I have denied it this year, or for 2025, so it is a common request.
Other comments, questions? Okay, next on our agenda is the discussion for the budget 2025, and as I look at our agenda, we also have under new business resolution 67-2024 to talk about budget reduction. I'm not sure if we're going to be redundant in those conversations or not.
I'll try to tie them together. I do have a presentation to kind of start us off on that,
Perfect, thank you.
if all the controllers work. We'll see. Wrong one.
This is also projecting online?
It should be, if I can figure out how to project it right now, which I may need Zach for. I hope he's listening. It's not working. None of my stuff is reaching
Never
tonight.
fear, Zach is here.
Yes, thank you.
You see he was shy, he came in kind of ducking the camera, but just keep smiling, Zach, you'll be all right.
I was gonna say he knows which angle, so.
You should have turned it off before you came in.
All of my controllers are dying over here.
It's not in the budget, city manager, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, it should be. Should project it somehow. It's showing that it can feel this.
Yeah.
There it is.
There you go.
Perfect.
If Zach can't do it, nobody can.
Thanks, Zach.
That's gonna be comp time. That's comp time.
All right, so I first off wanted to welcome a familiar face back. Adam Blowers has joined as our interim comptroller with the departure of Stephanie Newcomb. And so Comptroller Blowers has jumped right in. I think we've done negotiations, budgets. We've tied to everything in the last couple of days. So we're going to walk through some of the questions that have come up regarding the budget, as well as assessments. Assessments and budgets are two separate units, and our assessor actually provided some of this information. So I'm going to walk through pieces of this to first look at the assessment, why we did a reassessment, and then dive into some of the questions around the budget. So basic, what is a reassessment? It's part of real property tax law, section 102. It says that we have to do a reassessment. It's a systematic analysis of all property in or all parcels within a municipality. They have to be at a stated uniform percentage of value as of a valuation date. So this has to be done. They should be completed every 3 to 4 years or as needed. Our previous revaluation was in 2019 for 2020, so it's been a while. After a reassessment, the fair market value and the assessed value should be the same. Our goal was to bring all property values to 100% of market value in 2024, and that's what happened with the tentative tax roll. Why do we need reassessments? It's to restore equity in the roll and ensure that the tax burden is distributed equally and fairly among all taxpayers. The assessor monitors and analyzes the real estate transactions to establish market value estimates. They go to the different properties. There are also lots of checks and balances throughout the process, including the informal hearing process, the grievance process, SCAR, and Article 7. The New York State Office of Real Property also reviews all of the assessment rolls and determines the equalization rate. So when the New York State Office of Real Property looks at our roll, they determine, is our roll accurate? Is it at 100% or something different? This is a graph that our assessor used previously that shows unfair and unequitable assessments. So these two houses are identical. Property A at a current market value was at 100,000. Property B was also should be market value of 100,000. However, property A was assessed at 80,000. Property B was assessed at 120,000. When looking at them, they're identical houses, but they're paying different assessment rates. Easy math, not real math, but easy math. If the tax rate is $20 on 100, the estimated taxes on your $80,000 house was $1,600, while on your $120,000 house, it was $2,400. So it's unfair. Yeah, they should be per thousand, not per hundred. Same on this chart.
Move the decimal point.
Yes. So on this is fair and equitable. The assessor comes through, says both houses are identical or similar in property, 100,000 for each. Their taxes then are equalized, and so your estimated taxes for both properties are $2,000. One has to pay $400 more. The other gets a decrease of $400. When we look at the tax roll, which can be confusing, this is our actual tax roll from 2 different years. You'll see a couple of things. So, and I know it's kind of hard to see up here. When you look at the tax roll, the blue box all the way to the left on both sides, that has your parcel info, the address, your owner's names, where they live. When you go to the next size, you'll see a lot of information about that property. So property information, including the address, the property type, how many acres, if they have a bank, what the deed is, and the assessed value and full market value. And so when you look at this on the very furthest over on the right, you can see on this property, they receive a basic star exemption, so they're getting an exemption from one. They have the county taxable value of $111,000, city taxable value of $111,000, school taxable value of $81,000. And so that's where one of those exemptions comes in. When you look at full market value, so this is from 2023, the full market value, although it's assessed at $111,000, full market says it should be assessed at $142,300. And that's because we were under what's called a 78% equalization rate. So our properties were below market value at 78%. So there was a difference. So they automatically look at what the property should be worth, according to New York State, is at that additional value. So the property on that was $142,308, I think. It's very hard for me to see as well. In 2024, we revalued all of our properties. The assessor went to each residence, same parcel of property. They looked at it and they said, looking at this, what they're seeing is the full taxable value for the county and the city is $135,000. That's the assessed value. School taxable value, again, there's a star exemption, it looks like, for $30,000, so they get that off the school tax. And so now this property's full market value is $135,000, and that's 100% equalization. That means that when we have the certified tax roll, the state agrees and says, yep, this property looks right at $135,000. Previously, they used the estimation of the 78%. So that's why full market value looked different. Now we're using 100% equalization. 135 equals 135. So what happened in our assessments to our taxable? So there's different types of taxable property, non-taxable, special franchise, railroad property, all of those things. So we had 4,168 parcels in 2023, 4,166 parcels in 2024. You can see the land value, you can see the total value. So the total value of all of the parcels in the city, I've heard this discussion a lot about valuation changing an average percentage, and it was 49%, 42%, 47%. I've heard a lot of numbers. It's not per property percentage. We're talking about the total value of all parcels in the city increased by that percentage. So when you look at that, you can see these are our taxable parcels. When you get into the next one, those are your special franchises, and so they have additional taxations on those. Please don't ask me too many questions on this because I'll have to look to my assessor to help with some of these, understanding a little further. Utility is also a different entity. Railroad is a different entity. And some of these you'll see went down in value. And then, always an elephant in the room, the properties that are non-taxable. So in 2023, we had 361 parcels that were not taxable. They're wholly exempt. In 2024, we went down to 353 parcels that are wholly exempt. Land value, 57 million to 2024, 56 million. Total value, however, notice the value in those parcels, so there were improvement on those parcels, increased. However, when we talk about taxable assessed value for the city, which is how you create the tax rate, those don't go into that. When we talk about taxable assessed value, the other thing that doesn't go into that is all of the other exemptions that we talk about. So just a few facts about the assessment roll. Our highest assessed home in 2024 is $1.3 million. Our median assessed home is $143,900. And our lowest assessed home is $33,500. And I'm going to switch hats and go to the budget discussion. But I know Councilor Peeler has a question and the mayor is there, so.
So there's some really, really expensive houses that are on 14 going down toward the Legion X property.
I don't know where those are, but yeah.
Upwards of 2+, 3+ million. But I know one of them, mainly the most expensive one, recently became purchased but tax exempt. So
Right.
so do we have a massively large property that's now tax exempt? Is that why? Because 1.5 is probably 50% lower than I would have guessed.
So that is our home. That's a home.
Right. These are all homes that are on these.
Yep.
I'm speaking of homes.
Yep, that's our highest assessed value this year.
Thank you.
So a budget discussion. I want to be clear, the assessment piece is a piece of the whole. And your assessments, that's where a lot of people are asking questions because they impact not just your city taxes, but they also impact your school taxes and your county taxes. And this is something that other municipalities have struggled with. With the housing market changes that occurred, all of the assessments have increased in this region because the market has shown that our property is more valued. How that ties into a budget is more discussed with this entity and then the proposed budget that we went through. So I am going to turn over some of this presentation very shortly to the comptroller, but I will give you a quick overview on our budgeting process. So our budget consists of 3 funds, but within those funds, every fund has a revenue budget. So that's how much money the city government will take in during the fiscal year. It includes sales tax, it includes property tax, it includes all the revenues generated by departments for services such as licenses, permits, fees, property sales, income, investments, any other grants. All of that is in your revenue budget of your general fund. Your expense budget or expenditures, that's all your current operations. So it does include salaries for all of our employees, our pensions, our debt service, all the way down to pens, papers, pencils, printing services, rents, utilities, contracts. When we get done with creating the budget, it becomes a legally binding document. Once we have that budget, that becomes then my job and staff's job to execute that budget. In addition to the general fund budget, there's a water budget and a sewer budget. Those are separate entities. The water budget goes for water plant as well as repairs in any of our water lines, and sewer goes for wastewater and those repairs. It gets a little complex sometimes because I provide oversight to that as well. So you may see some cost sharing where a salary, it's the easiest one for me to choose right now. I keep looking at Adam because I know it's not as easy as I'm about to explain it. But a percentage of my time may be working with the wastewater treatment plant, and so they put a percentage of my salary into that. So there is some sharing there, but it has to be, there's checks and balances in place on that. And then there's debt. We do generate short-term and long-term debt when we look at our budget components. How we do that is we issue bonds and bands to fund building, maintenance, and improvements. That's where a lot of our infrastructure funding is coming from. When we talk about some of the things that, and I'm looking at one of the Stormwater Task Force members, she's right in front of me, so she knows this probably better than I do at this point. When we look at funding replacements of large lines or lining things, you're talking several hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars on very small, what in my mind may feel like a small improvement. It's not, it's a huge improvement. So that's a piece of that debt, is because we're bonding for those large infrastructures. Every year, a portion of the city's expense budget is used to fund debt service. And so that's where levy and other things pay for that debt in long term. The more the city spends on debt service, the less funds that we have available for other things. So when we're doing large infrastructure projects, we may have less funding for other projects. I really gave myself more slides than I thought. Thanks, Adam. Fund balance. So fund balance is the total accumulation of operating surpluses and deficits. Some people refer to it as our savings account. I don't really like that much because it feels like we're storing that away. Fund balance is when, one, fund balance is not recurring. So when we spend that money, it's not guaranteed to come back. And it's more of a reserve fund. It's something for, I'm not going to say rainy day, but you guys know what I mean. When times are tight, you need that fund balance. As a city, we must maintain a fund balance reserve that is 12 to 15% of total budget. I will ask the council to look at that next year because I think we're a little low on that recommendation. When we get to water and sewer fund, we're at 30%. We probably should look at that too. It's just good practice to look at those reserves and say, is this real? A lot of municipalities have increased their fund balance. Things like the pandemic or large infrastructure situations have shown us that you need to have a little bit more in that account. In 2024, our fund balance was at 23% or 4.5 million. It's a total of our operating. And I know this is my last one. The other piece that has come up is working capital or liquid assets versus fund balance. So our total budget runs about $20 million per year. Those are all budgeted, comes in, comes out. That can be working capital in the city's assets that could be used to manage financial risk, and it can include both unrestricted and restricted funds. So when we look at working capital or our liquid assets, we want to know how we can use that money to best work for us. Our estimates on working capital is anywhere between $17 and $19 million. It doesn't mean that there is a savings account of $17 to $19 million. It means we have $17 to $19 million of assets that we are bringing in and putting out that we can invest. And so we've started to go down the path of having an investment strategy where we utilize those funds at 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months or longer to know that when they roll in, they can roll out. It is one thing that makes often our comptrollers, including my newest welcome back comptroller, a little nervous, is if that rainy day does happen, we need to use that funding immediately. Or if we get really pushing ahead on our capital projects, we're going to need that money. And so we need it to be liquid so we can use it. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Amy. So you can tell I designed this slide. It's very colorful and enjoyable to look at. To simplify it, though, really surplus versus liquid funds, you think of surplus as your extra, the things that maybe you didn't plan for, that you had sale of city property, let's say, and you budgeted for $50,000 and you got $200,000 that year. That extra offsets any expenses that came in high, but it also then goes into your fund balance. So surplus is a lot like our fund balance. Liquid, as Amy mentioned, that's the money in our bank account that we're using for daily operations. And, you know, it can seem like a lot, as Amy mentioned, but what happens is capital projects are very expensive. It's money that we've borrowed for. And so when we have money that we've borrowed for, my preference is to get that money back out the door and pay for those capital projects. So you want to have that money as liquid as possible, which is basically just easily accessible. So again, surplus being kind of your extra funds that are not allocated to anything at the current time, and liquid being your funds mainly for daily operations that you can access very easily. So these are some financial trends from 2019 through 2023, and then 2024. Those are unaudited budget numbers, and then the 2025 proposed. So you have revenues in blue, the tax levy in orange there at the bottom, and then expenses in gray. Just kind of shows revenues and expenses, the trends over the last few years. They've been pretty close. And then the tax levy, where that's gone, started around 6.9 in 2019, up into 7.7 in 2021, about 8.5 in 2023, same in 2024, and then 2025, the proposed up to 10. So then getting to fund balance. So we have a fund balance in all three funds, all three major funds, general, water, and sewer. Again, general is blue. I should have made water blue. I'm sorry for that. But water is orange. Sewer is green, though. And so this, so this goes back from 2014 to 2024. That 2024 number, again, is unaudited at this time, but we feel like it's a very, very close estimate. And that just shows, you know, where we've gone and where we are now in terms of proper budgeting. You know, you can see in 2020, which I don't know who was here at that time, but the controller at that time let the water fund get down to $33,500. But then I think there was a rate increase at that time, built it back up. We can blame COVID a little bit too, I suppose, but now into 2023, 2024, those numbers are getting a lot more healthy. As Amy mentioned, inside those thresholds, a little above those thresholds for fund balance policies. Okay, the tax levy. So it can be complicated. It can be pretty straightforward depending on how you look at it. But basically, the tax levy is determined by the total expenses that the city is planning to have, minus all revenues that we have. The difference is that tax levy. So the standard, I guess, in government is to do it that way. There's a lot of times when it doesn't feel like it's happening that way, where you're coming up with the levy and then you're trying to cut expenses or see if there's other revenues you can increase. But the standard is you take all the proposed expenses or approved expenses, things like sales tax, sale of property, utility tax, occupancy tax, take that out of the expenses, and then whatever's remaining, that's how much money you should use, or that's how much money you need to raise to balance the budget. And then the tax rate, very similarly, once you determine what that levy is, you just take the taxable assessed value, which was on a few slides prior, divide that by your levy, and that's your rate. So that's a pretty standard calculation as well, and you already have your taxable assessed value. So it's really just messing around with that levy, and your rates come out. I think, Pat, is it to the 6th decimal place? Yes. So we get very specific on that. But,
yes, we do.
But yeah, so simple calculation. It's something we keep it in a spreadsheet, and then we can kind of play around with that and see what those rates look like.
All right. So with that, this is from the proposed budget or recommended budgets, kind of final slide of that budget of what it looks like. property tax cap is something that we'll be talking about setting a hearing for. The property tax cap is 2% or a very large equation, which is in the back of the budget document, which takes in previous tax caps, takes in pilot agreements. I will not remember all of the pieces, but it's an equation that then comes up with that. So our property tax cap is 9.8 million in levy, almost 9.9 million in levy. That has been something that standard municipalities override and then decide if they actually need that override. That doesn't have to happen that way, but that has been what has happened in the past. With that, we've had a lot of discussion about what the real life impact on homes under the proposed budget would look like. And so the median home value on this budget is now, the house was 117.5, is now 143.9. It's increased in value $26,400. The taxes for 2024, that homeowner would have paid $2,027 on city taxes, and I can only speak for city taxes. I know a lot of questions have come out about school and county taxes. Those are outside of what I have control on, and this council has control on. And then in 2025, if, as is, that proposed budget were to pass, that homeowner would be seeing a reduction of $17. So I did it on a variety of homes in different wards. So you can see homeowner in one of the wards, home number 1, their home in 2024 was assessed value $57,500. 2025, which is their 2024 roll, it's now assessed at $111,400. It's a big change in value of their property. It's $54,000 in change. That does mean that their taxes would go up $563. It goes through multiple homes and sizes, so you'll see a $104,000 home to a $112,000 home, a $96,000 to $114,006, and then home 4 is $177,000 to $343,000, home 5 $389,000 to $618,000, and then home 6 $1.1 million to $1.3 million, and then you'll see what their taxes would do. So the increase in the value. And then home 7 is the home from the previous tax roll discussion. So where we saw that equalization rate, that home under equalization, under fair market was more expensive than when it was reassessed. And they would see a decrease of $31. So, and this is not simple math, but how a property owner can look at it is if you got your revaluation and you look at that, with the proposed rate, if you take it and you multiply it by $13.97, then divide it by 1,000, you can look and see what your new tax bill would be under the proposed. There's obviously other discussions that will happen, and that level could go down, could go up based on what council decides. I do want to mention senior exemption. That's also on the discussion for tonight. Senior exemption is a little challenging to tell you exactly what that impact will be on your total assessed value, only because it's an opt-in program. So our seniors will have to opt in to get that exemption. We mapped over what their current exemptions are with the county and can give you some of that. If they were to do that, it would increase the amount of the exemption to 1.4 million more, which means that would come off the total assessed value. So with the adoption of the resolution, the proposed budget's tax rate would be $13.99 per 100 or per 1,000. So same things. I did not do that tax roll one. You'll notice home 7 disappeared on this one, but you can see same model. If we use the proposed budget on a median home, instead of that $17 savings, they would now have a $14 savings. However, if they are seniors, and I only went through home 3, depending on what their income is. So if a senior makes under $18,000, they would get an exemption amount of 50%. And so you can see as you look through what they would be. So home 1 was that home that, I'll go back up, had an increase in their value. If they were a senior that made $18,000 or less in their income, they would see a decrease in $215 in their taxes. One other clarification that I realized after I was done with this, so I didn't correct it, but you can see it. When you see the parentheses here, it says indicates a decreased amount. When you do it here, I did the math the opposite direction, so the parentheses indicates an increased amount. Sorry for any confusion that costs, but, so if you see the parentheses, that means for home one, if they're at 35% of the exemption, they're making more than or less than $20,999.99, then they would have an increase in their taxes from the previous year of $18.25 with the senior exemption. And that's all I have for this part of the discussion. Just to give you more information, a lot of questions have come out about these things, so we wanted to make sure you had enough information on it.
And if we think that explanation will end it, it probably won't, so.
No.
Counselors, discussions, questions? Counselor Lavin?
I know this is, the numbers are the numbers for individual taxpayers, but the bottom line is, and I think Cheryl touched on it very nicely, that you will be taking $2 million more from the public than you took last year. That will be spread over a variety of people, some of whom are already smarting from a school tax increase that I know we have nothing to do with, but it's based on the same assessments, and will greatly affect the work that David West can do to try and bring this community from the highest taxed community in the area to something we have an opportunity this year, as Cheryl was pointing out, that to take a step back and give our people a breather and to start bringing us back into towards an alignment that will make us competitive for development, for everything else. We can dance around the numbers for individual median home people, but take $2 million from the 12,000 people of Geneva. That's what you're doing in this budget. It's a bottom line. You're asking for $2 million more this coming year, 2 point something more. And the timing couldn't be worse. The assessment is a jarring things to seniors and to the working class significantly. And I think we have to stop dancing around the median and look at the macro, because it's going to affect the ability of this city to bring in new people, build new houses, recruit new employment for the place. We need to take other strategies other than just simply continuing to raise taxes as we've done for now 20 years. That's how we got to this point where we're out of line, completely out of line with the surrounding communities. And we have an opportunity here. I just think we should take it at least as a breather year. I did have a question for the CFO, if that's okay.
Our comptroller, sure.
Yeah. So I know you're new, you're back new, but you were here before. The discussion of investment, city investment, which we've now passed a policy, the question is still hanging out there to the community. But it looks to me as if we lost $1.2 million over the last couple of years by sitting on the investment issues. When you were here before, I assume you used CDs and other things at times to bring in revenue for that.
Yes, we used a number of different CDs. The money, our operating dollars are in a money market account, so which it is today as well.
Yeah.
So it's earning interest. When I left in 2022, interest rates were not very good at all, and so at that time we weren't earning very much on anything. But we did have some CDs. Certain things couldn't be commingled also, so we couldn't put everything together. I think some things changed in 2019 that finally municipalities started when that started to be unrolled to municipalities, they started utilizing it. But yeah, I mean, we would do different things, CDs, money market, savings accounts, things like that. But again, my concern was always having those funds easily accessible, because a lot of the money that sits in a municipal bank account is capital fund dollars. You know, a high percentage of it is because those are the most expensive projects. And so at any given time, you know, if you have $17 million in the bank account, you know, next week we could pay out $4 million for a capital project that we're working on.
You could, but those
Yep.
things are predictable.
Yep.
And you have the history of spending, and that's why people do these investments. I just, at a time when it looks to me like we lost more than $1 million through our oversight, we're turning around and asking for $2 million more from the taxpayers. And I think we need to take a breather here, take advantage of the situation when we have 19 million. Maybe we have to bring down some of those to give the taxpayers a chance here. But I've never been associated with a government that proposed a 27% or 21% increase year over year on anything. Maybe FDR during World War II did it, but I've never seen anything like that. And we're just floating it out there on top of the highest municipal tax rate in the area. So I think we have some work to do, and I'm glad you're back.
Thank you.
Councilor Peeler.
I'm a little alarmed at this rate, this increase, this total. This is my 5th budget, and we've elected to lift the tax cap in every council as a insurance policy that we don't get penalized if and when we do go over the tax cap. But we've never been presented a budget that wouldn't fly if we didn't pass the tax cap. This budget is so high, the current tax cap would be set to like what, 9.2 million?
Yes.
And this budget is and this levy is over 10. So I don't know. I don't know how we would pass this current levy without lifting the tax cap. This tax roll is over the tax cap already. So I'm a little concerned with it. I'm more comfortable with increases we've done in the past at 4%. I think 4% is a reasonable number, and it's not shocking to the taxpayer, and it's also not kicking the can, because we've done the opposite in the past. We haven't raised taxes, we've frozen the levy, and then we've had this avalanche of taxes follow us up later. And I don't think that's fiscally responsible. Nobody manages their independent funding like that from their household standpoint. They don't just refuse to pay bills and then all of a sudden be in default of their credit cards. So that they spend money regularly and they factor in slow increases. And I think what's good for our households is also good for the way we manage our budget. So I would encourage our management and our staff to try to work around a more reasonable number that's more in line with, you know, a 4% increase or something along those lines, as opposed to, I think it's 23% or whatever the increase is now, going from 8.1 to 10 plus. Thank you.
Councilor Brennan.
I have to agree with Councilors Peeler and Lavin because there's more to the cost of living than just this proposed budget increase, where all of us have suffered through several years of high inflation. Gasoline has been expensive. We've almost gotten used to it being expensive. I know it's lowering now because of the presidential election, but it won't last. It won't last at all. And there's other signs, if you will, of what I call economic ill health. You know, volunteerism is down. It's almost impossible to get volunteers for almost any organization I'm familiar with. In fact, literally just this week, I heard about volunteers wanting to get paid, which is a contradiction in terms, but it actually is out there. And to me, that's a sign of ill health. Our own economic consultant that we hired, Gary Ferguson, pointed out the high cost of taxation and what that is as an impediment to growing the city of Geneva. If we were to go forward with our tax increase, let's just say at face value now, you would actually force more Genevans to leave Geneva. It would be the opposite of growth. It's I don't want to ask for a show of hands. I don't think that'd be appropriate, but I have to point out that we all have just paid our school taxes, and I would be hard pressed to find anybody that didn't pay more in their school tax in a recent bill than just a year ago. it's not going to get better next year. It's not going to go down. So the forecast, if you will, from my point of view, is that we have to take a different route. We have to go down a different road than the status quo. And I know the city manager's keenly aware of this, and I'm sure everybody's keenly aware that there's going to have to be some tough questions and some tough situations to answer. But I think we have to take care of that. Thank you.
Counselor Whitfield.
Looking at the situation at hand, I'm thinking about the people generally. There was a column that I saw where a middle classman was talking about the budget being preposterous and that it's too much for them to bear. With that being said, now if a middle classman is complaining about it, we look at the people who are barely getting by on a daily basis. What about the lower classmen? And they also stated that Geneva now would be looked at as just a city for the rich people to live in. Because, quite frankly, to me, that is what it looks like, as if this budget is made for rich people. And if that's the case, like Councilor said, Brennan said, he said that it will push people out of Geneva. And there's no growth in that. I see a decrease. And I don't think it's fair for the people.
Okay, so this is very interesting conversation. So we're gonna, this council is gonna be faced with some challenging decisions to make. The city manager and staff have worked diligently to put a budget in front of us. They've done that not without the citizens and the taxpayers in mind, not without economic development in mind. They've done this very thoughtfully. So the budget was handed to this council. This is now the council's budget. So if we talk about making changes, whether they're decreases or increases, this council is going to have to make those decisions on what those decreases or increases mean. And I think the importance of that is I've sat on this council for the majority of time since 1996, and I've seen the city of Geneva change from the 70s and 80s to what it is right now. When we talk about assessed values and we talk about some of these numbers we're looking at on the board, a lot of people would love to see their houses double in value. You know, that's important. I'd rather see house values increase than house values decrease. And we've watched this for the last 10 or 15 years. We've seen these increase in values, which I think is a positive thing for the city of Geneva. We talk about tax rate, we talk about tax levies. We can go in a lot of different directions, but we've made some tough decisions throughout the years that if we wanted to continue the city of Geneva to head in a positive direction, if we wanted to spur economic development, and if we think we're going to thwart economic development by a tax rate, I think we're misled in those discussions, because there's a lot of other levers we can pull to drive economic development, to drive housing development. We're having continual discussions about that. To me, you know, when we look at $2.1 million, $1.7 million, whatever number you want to put around that, we're looking at how we invest in the city of Geneva to make the city of Geneva a better place for everybody to live. We're short-sighted, I believe, because we've made decisions in the late 90s and 2000s to make investments to make our city more beautiful and attractive. We've seen positive private and public investment continually take place throughout our neighborhoods, throughout our downtown, and throughout our lakefront. So for us to be conservative, extremely conservative, and try to take a step back and take a pause, for me, is not the right move. In fact, during COVID, I wish we would have taken more aggressive steps to invest more in the city of Geneva, especially when interest rates were in our favor, because everybody was being extremely conservative because they didn't know what was going to happen next. It's hindsight. You know, we can talk about what we could have done. I don't want the city of Geneva to be sitting here in 5 or 10 years wishing what we could have done to move the city of Geneva forward. So I trust where our staff has brought us. When we talk about what we would have to change, and I believe staff will give us that opportunity, and we're going to have that discussion later on this agenda. When we talk about what we're going to have to change, we're going to have to do things like not make capital improvements. We're going to have to do things like not make equipment purchases. We're going to have to do things that are going to be like not add labor, which we keep talking about. Do you have enough labor to reduce overtime? Do we have enough labor to produce economic development? The city manager and staff have provided us with 1.5 full-time employees increase to talk about grants, to talk about the options that we need to be able to improve the economic development department, the HR departments, the other departments in the city of Geneva. 1.5 increase in FTE is not a lot. And I just mentioned earlier that these departments have asked for more increases in labor to be able to support the needs that they need to get things done. We're saying no to those. So we can say no to capital improvements. We can say no to equipment purchases. We can kick that can down the road, because when we get down the road, do those vehicles cost less? Do that labor and those materials cost less for capital improvements? The answer is going to be no. I've never seen a decrease. We saw the charts up there. We saw expenses, we saw revenues. Expenses don't go down unless you quit making them. So if you're making your standard purchase expenses that you need to on a daily or yearly basis, they're not going in the wrong direction. So for me, taking advantage of the challenges that we're dealing with right now is the investment in the future of the city of Geneva. But this council has to make those decisions. So I just ask you to take a look at the decisions you're making, because I've seen people not make those decisions in municipalities, and it impacts them either in the future with double-digit or higher expenses. We want to grow our tax base. We want to bring people, homes, industries into the city of Geneva. We're not going to do that by sitting on our tails, that's for sure.
May I say something?
When in public comment, you can come to the podium. Okay? Councilor Lavin?
I don't know the process you've used in the past. I'm not comfortable with the council trying to make city manager decisions about how to live within the correct parameters we give her. We say we want a $8.2 million levy. The best person to get us there is the city manager. It's not, but I've seen this now for 4 or 5 budget sessions. You put the budget out September 15th. You have a few sessions. The council is not in a position to make significant cuts. They end up cutting $100,000 on a $28 million spending plan, and we're in a crisis mode here. And I think that's the difference, is that you're talking about costs and cutting. I'm talking about revenue and collaboration and looking for growth, both in the government, operation of government. And there's not much energy for that kind of energy to force where we can collaboration with surrounding governments. We just throw up our hands and say that'll never happen, and as a result, you get to a position like this. 27% or 23% tax increase is double digits, and we're saying we can't continue to do that with people on South Main Street paying $25,000 a year in taxes on a house with no mortgage, and people running Section 8 housing at the other end of town, squeezing every dollar out of the housing stock as it falls because of the amount of taxes they're paying on it. I think maybe there's a fundamental difference. We have been in my view, the West Virginia of upstate New York, waiting for the state to give us the next handout so we can make downtown look pretty, even as the housing stock dies, and is dying rapidly now. And I think that it's perfectly within this to the council's direction to the manager to say, we're not in a position to go spending 23% more at this time. And we are starting from a point where we're already a leader in local taxes. Where's the energy for having discussions with the town? We've had one meeting, and they're open to some discussions of fire and police with the county. They're open to do that, but where's the energy? 2 people came to the meeting, the mayor was not there. And these are places where revenue can change, where we can, both sides of the equation can be there. And I think that we can't keep saying we're investing in Geneva when we're poisoning the well.
Counselor, you mentioned increasing revenues. We're talking about the 2025 budget. Do you plan on an increase in revenues that you know of for the 2025 budget?
Not with the energy that this council is, and this administration has put towards looking for government spending decreases, not just here in the community, but across the region. I just think it's a bigger issue.
You have 29 days.
Yeah, this is the way we set it up. You give these guys
Counselor,
you get 3 weeks, Your Honor.
we've been talking about increasing revenues for years. We've been talking about combined services for years. We've been talking about working with the town and the county for years. And I can guarantee you a lot of that has taken place. What you're asking for is an immediate increase in revenues to impact the 2025 budget. You're also making a comment that the city manager should come back to us with a $2 million reduction in the
Yes.
budget. And I'm not saying the city manager won't come back, but the city manager can come back, or staff, city manager and staff, can come back with recommendations for reduction of $2 million or even more than that in the budget. But this council is going to have to make that decision.
Right, and in the last time this happened, the council wanted to cut 2 police positions that were open at the time, and it resulted in time and a half taking up the work afterwards anyway.
Sure wasn't a smart decision, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't good management.
Yep.
Where do as I said earlier, we had a police officer make $210,000 2 years ago. And where's the energy for looking at the way we're managing this little town? This is not a big city.
There's a lot of energy, but it disappoints you, obviously.
Well, it does, and I think it disappoints
I'm
a lot
okay
of
with that.
people. I'm getting notes every day from people saying, I'm going to be leaving town, I'm going to sell my house, and it's probably going to be an Airbnb because it's too expensive for anyone else to own. And I think that we have to confront these issues and not just hope that another state grant's going to come in and give us flower money downtown.
Councilor Petropoulos.
Well, I mean, I obviously heard a lot of good points tonight, but I want to know what gets cut. If we leave it in the city manager's hands, again, as the mayor said, we'll get recommendations. But I know from the streets of Ward 5, they want their police protection, they want fire response, they want their streets paved. All right, we know that. They want clean water and sewers. Above and beyond that, what do we have? So we do need to look at all of these things. And no, Ward 5 generally isn't the rich people in town, I can tell you that right now. Certainly not your humble servant. But that being the case, I also want to bring up the school taxes. What people don't realize is, I don't even know if the county has any direct say in that. Perhaps Supervisor Kennedy can shed some light on that. But we need to start going to school board meetings and look at them when they're coming up with their budgets. Because like I said before, you know, I went to school either on a subway, a city bus, or an old 1939 Rattler, and we didn't get a new school bus every other years. We didn't have computers, we had books. We took care of those books. From what I'm seeing, kids don't have, they break computers, oh, we'll pay for another one. I mean, that's where a lot of our school taxes go. So, you know, instead of just, I mean, yeah, we'll do our bit. That's why we're here. But if you want to make a difference across the board, then yes, you got to start going to school board meetings and looking at them funny because they just gleefully put something on a ballot. People vote yes, thinking, hey, it's the school. The money isn't always wisely spent. It isn't, and I see that. So we need to scrutinize everything, not just our own budget, but we need to, as citizens, look at our school budget as well. And, you know, there's other things to consider. Some people need a break. Other people can maybe afford it. But we're all expecting value for our tax dollars. I just want to make sure that when we do make our final decision, whatever it is, that people are at least reasonably satisfied because, again, there are other places in this country that are really hurting. We're at a crossroads. I think we can do a good job. I trust city management. I trust our own judgment. But let's not make sudden, you know, axes without
first discussing them. I think we got 3 weeks. I think we'll get the work done. I think we have the energy. Thank you,
Council
Mr.
Peeler.
Mayor.
So I don't lack energy in this topic. I'm galvanized by all this. This is not a crisis budget. I've been around for a crisis budget, and Mr. Blowers got us through it. He did. And we heard a lot of kind of sky is falling rhetoric that if it wasn't going to happen, if the state was going to pull all of our funding, it was going to be, dogs and cats living together, total chaos. Right? And it didn't pan out that way. It just didn't pan out that way. So I think a modest increase below the tax cap somewhere, I don't know, high eights, mid-high eights, 8.6 million, maybe a 5% increase. I'd like to see what it looks like from our smarter people in the room, because I'm not entirely confident that it's going to be as doom and gloom as it might be presented. And I just want to hear those creative, intelligent options, because this is not left field. You're looking at a very fiscally responsible council. So this is not asking for a 4 to 5% increase is actually not controversial or left field, I believe, because we've always worried about our tax rate and our burden on our tax-paying residents from day one. So that I don't know if we need like a straw vote or some kind of collective decision of like what to look like for a budget, but this is the first major presentation of this budget, and as far as the total number, there was never a 28% or 27% increase in that 10.2 million.
On September 16th was when the recommended budget was provided with the whole presentation.
Right, but this is the first council meeting that we've had since then, is what I'm saying. So it's
right.
not like this is like a archaic document.
No.
We have multiple work sessions coming up.
That's right.
And we have a resolution number F on new business. We'll continue this discussion.
Yeah. So
Mayor, if I may, real
that's just my
So
my 2 cents.
So I do want to just kind of comment on the process and how we ended up with the budget that we have. So I was provided the information from council and community members that the things we wanted to make sure is to maintain our infrastructure, look at our future, make sure that our water, sewer, all of that, maintain our staffing levels at the full level, and all of those other pieces. When we built that budget, that's what we based it on. Some of the things that you heard earlier from our officers as well is we haven't had full staffing. We haven't had those things in the last 2-3 years. And so there's fluctuations even in our personnel services. While we may say that we had, 120 FTEs, we may not have had full 120 FTEs. We're getting closer to those levels, so those are all put into that budget. When we start to talk about reductions and how this process now works, I took the information from council that you provided me on things that you wanted to make sure we had in there. That we were looking at our infrastructure systems, that we were looking at our equipment. We were looking at not Band-Aiding, but fixing things and moving us forward. That's where that budget comes from. There were long discussions with our departments on what to reduce, what to move. There can continue to be those discussions. When you look back through your budget presentation, what I provided to council and then is also available for the community on our website is what the additions were. So things like additional vegetation management, things like working differently with the bid. Sorry, Kat, you're in my eyesight. Working differently with the bid, not providing their full recommended level, but moving some of those resources elsewhere. Those things all got incorporated to that budget. At that point, the city manager turns the budget over to you. From there, if you say, we want to look at a $2 million reduction, I will give you $2 million worth of things that could change operations, could shift how we're doing things. What I also put in there is increased revenues, not just in levy side. Increased revenues, not just because we have state aid payments. Increased revenues because we are investing and we have taken on a new investment strategy, and some of those returns will come in the next 12 months. Some will take 24 months. It's not a flip of a switch. So those things are all in your budget document. This is the first discussion on it. You now have work sessions every Wednesday where we'll dive deeper. On those work sessions on Friday before, if there are certain areas that you want staff to be a part of that conversation, council members will provide that, and I'll make sure staff have the answers to your questions on, what if we reduced, I'm not going to name a department because then they'll think I'm looking at them, but if we reduce staffing in a certain department, I'm going to go with bid because Kat told me to. If we cut the bid out of the budget, what would happen? And then I would reach out to Catherine and say, Catherine, this is a question that came forward. If we were not able to provide funding to the bid, what would happen? Or what if I'll go the other way. What if we increased it by an extra $100,000? What additional services would the bid provide? Again, Catherine would be at that meeting and have that further discussion. There is definitely places that you can look at increasing or decreasing, and that's really something that this document starts the conversation for the community and where do you want to go. It's your investment as community members and then council members on what you want to see in the community. And some of the things that we've heard over and over again, we're trying to see how we want to invest in those resources. And so I do also want to say, because I've had a lot of people ask about my personal interest in this, my personal interest ends the day I deliver you a product I can be proud of and takes all of those things. I then turn it over to you to start making those decisions because you are the decision makers. I'm just delivering what the product is that you wanted.
One of the decisions we can make is to ask you as city manager, as the expert in government, to bring this back in at a more reasonable number. And what's happened in the past, and I've seen it, it's great local politics, is the manager comes back and says, I have to cut 2 policemen or 4 policemen if we're going to do this. And of course, everybody gets their, gets in an uproar about police or fire and things like that. I think that you have a $19 million surplus funds floating around right now. If you took $1 million of that and put it against the $2 million request I'm making and came up with another other cuts we're making that we're suggesting, but asking this council to go through and say, all right, we're going to get rid of the recreation department. It'll save $700,000, and we'll give Hobart the skating rink to operate for their hockey team. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing this council will come up with to get to what we're saying is a livable number. You've delivered a budget. Your interpretation that you've analyzed the cities, I don't think the council was ever asked, where should we end up at a percentage increase or not. This is a vague interpretation of senses of what the community might want. And I think my answer is, before we get to giving this council the cutting responsibility, is to ask our professional management to come back with something closer to what the rest of the country is living with in terms of cost of living. Why is this the year for 26% or whatever it is?
Just on that, I do want to, and Adam, I'm going to go back to you to talk about, there's not 19 million in surplus funds. So do you want to talk about surplus again?
It's right.
No.
So
50-50, right?
right. So the 17-19, it obviously fluctuates.
Right.
That's our total city funds, basically. Right. So, we had a slide about fund balance. So, if you can go to the fund balance.
Matt Horn pointed out that it was as low as $200,000 one year.
It was.
Right.
Right. And so.
We got in big trouble that year.
We did. And now you can see, so unaudited, 4.2 million in the general fund. So, that can be used at council's discretion. Now, would you want to pull 2 million from fund balance to offset that? I wouldn't recommend doing that.
The 19 number is more than the 4.5 in general.
So the 19 million is already, that's earmarked funds. That's not extra money.
But the earmark might be that's going to be spent 10 months from now, and that you put it into income producing accounts in the meantime.
Correct.
It's an obligation, and you're going to spend it eventually, but you don't sit on it for 2 years and lose
and
tax.
those are the funds that we are
invested.
putting in 6, 12, 18-month CDs or different financial instruments.
Well, there's also new financial instruments that are instantly available with a phone call. They're not committed to long periods of time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're, with that new investment policy, that's what we're using. That's what we're doing with those funds rather than just having them stay in that money market. We're keeping some in there, obviously.
Now.
Right.
Yes.
Right. We passed it in the last meeting. arguably 2 years too late.
Right.
But
Further discussion? Okay, we'll move on the agenda to establishment of a finance committee. I'm not sure, Councilor Levin, you want to lead this one?
sure, this is what is, frankly, just following up on the last comment I made. This was an example of what happens in government when you don't have oversight and expertise helping a council like this understand its finances. So I asked for it back in January or February, was voted down, saying that the charter doesn't allow us to have committees. I'm now asking again, now that we have a demonstration of millions lost to not enough oversight, not enough understanding. I'm not pointing fingers at the old CFO, the mayor, or the city manager at this point. I'm saying that we did not, as a council, meet our fiduciary responsibilities for overseeing the city's money. And it's not just the CFO or the city manager who's responsible for that. If we had had one, and this is all I'm asking, just start with a finance committee, we would not have had that money sitting untapped for 18 months or 2 years. And this is just best practice in every government I'm familiar with, in every organization and nonprofit, is to have a finance committee with some outside expertise as well as council members, so we understand the budget and we can engage in the city's finances in real time. I know I'm told by council that we will need to have a change of the charter, but that's just a vote of 6 people on this council. It doesn't take a referendum or anything else like that to do this. And I think it will put the council in a position of having doing its fiduciary duty, which, other than manage the mayor, the manager, and watch the money, that's really what our job is here.
Councilor Peeler.
So, Councilor Lavin, with all due respect, speaking of a vote to make decisions, didn't we already have this presented on the floor and it was voted down?
Yeah, it was. This is a discussion, and I think I'll let you continue to talk, but I'm going to reach out to legal to talk about process.
About why it's back on the floor?
No, to talk about process of what it would take to change the charter.
I'm more interested in why it's back on the floor, because based on rules of order, this should have never come to the floor.
It's not coming for a vote. It's
Okay,
just
so,
coming back for discussion.
so we've changed the flavor of it to allow it back on the floor?
No, if it came as a resolution on the floor, that would be against the general
Okay.
rules of order procedure.
Okay, just for clarity.
Yep.
But the 1.2 million reasons I can give you for doing it. if you
Yeah,
like.
well, there's
Counselor,
5
please,
reasons
please,
it got
please,
voted down
please.
before.
Just look for
So,
the floor. That's
so-
all I'm asking.
I don't disagree with being informed or having unity of thought and having us be, well-equipped intellectually before we make our decisions. I think all of this essentially gets solved with properly themed and regular work sessions about the topic available. If we want to have a financial health work session, quarterly, monthly, however many, all counselors can come. We can bring in the outside entities, the specialists that are so talked about. And whatever counselor doesn't come. Whatever counselor comes. And then we bring the discussion to the regularly scheduled council meeting for consideration. I think that's the way to go. It doesn't need any radical new vote or changing of the process or the charter. And it goes directly to the source, and that is the city councilors who need to be armed with this information. It doesn't divert them to someone else, or it doesn't kind of democratize or carve out the authorities that the voters really have bestowed upon us when they elected us to make these decisions. And there is a major dilution going on in this process. For example, when we talk about our votes, they're not weighted, but you've got myself, Councilor Grimaldi, and Councilor Pete Gilat, who's here, and collectively our 3 wards are 3/4 of the entire city of the city. But we only have 1/9 the voting So that's a majorly diluted representation of what's going on. And these subcommittees are going to break that down even more. But an actual work session, which gives all counselors an equal opportunity to sit in and kind of learn and grow, I think is really important, and we should consider that. I think it's actually solving the problem that you say exists, and I hope you would support that if we had more work sessions.
It took us 4
Council,
months to have an
please
organization.
ask for acknowledgement for the floor, and if you just wait a second, I'll come back around, because other councilors have the opportunity to have their discussion, please.
More open dialogue.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is, I'll come to in just a minute, I just want, I want legal to be able to provide what the direction would be in order to, and as an overview, staff and legal would need direction, the majority of direction from this council to proceed forward. So just let us know what the process would be.
Sure. So the basic process is that in order to change the charter in this fashion, you would need to have a local law to change the charter, and that would require a public hearing process. So kind of working backwards from that, before you set a public hearing to do anything, you ideally would have that local law in a more or less quote unquote final form that you've already kind of workshopped to the point that you can present to the public, because it doesn't make sense to be workshopping in front of the public and constantly having this moving target. So, and so it's important for you all to have a consensus or a discussion about what is the local law look like? What does this change specifically? And how, because you don't have a current existing committee structure, because it's prohibited by your charter, I think there needs to be some thought, if you wanted to pursue this, into what powers does this committee have? Not just who makes up the committee, but what powers does a committee have? Because typically in a government setting, a committee could be advisory only. It could be the formal process through which things get proposed and shot down, and things don't make it out of committee, and things like that. So you can have any permutation you'd like, but you need to have a discussion about that. And that probably, I don't know if it necessarily needs to be part of the local law, but that needs to be part of the bylaws, possibly of the committee or something of that nature. Anyway, my point is that needs to all be discussed. So you're kind of at this like preliminary stage right now of deciding if this is even something you want to pursue. But once this council gets to the point where it seems like there's a consensus, then that can be direction to staff, to legal, to start putting some meat around those bones.
Thank you. I'm gonna go, I'll get back to you. Council Morocco?
Now, Bill, when you were proposing these type, is this on? I can't tell. When you were proposing this, were you gonna allow the general public to also be allowed to come to these meetings and things like that?
When I just talked about work sessions?
Yeah.
Yeah, work sessions are public. They're public now, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We got one that already rolls.
Just want to make sure the general public knew it.
Council Petropoulos?
Yes, I always rather like the idea of an ad hoc committee, but I am very uncomfortable with changing the city charter because that could get ugly down the road. So I think the perfect compromise is to have work sessions strictly dedicated to financial matters. We can invite the controller. We can invite outside experts, whoever we agree these outside experts are. That's a good compromise for starters, because we don't know what changing the city charter will entail down the road. Let's say you have 3 counselors and they pick a yes man, and I just don't feel comfortable with it right now. But if this work session thing turns out, okay, yeah, we can discuss further improvements to it. But I think that's a really good start, and that should solve everybody's immediate concerns. So I like that idea.
That doesn't begin to solve the immediate concerns. This is the way we've been operating for years here. You have work sessions anytime you want them. It took 4 months to get an organizational meeting for this group up. And then when we did it, we had an outside speaker come in and lecture us about our jobs. The kind of committees I'm talking about are not being invented. The charter is not a constitution. It's easily changed. They do put you through a little bit more hoops. But Mr. Kennedy will tell you, he's on committees in the county. They don't have any right to make any vote that's binding. It has to go to the full committee, the full county legislature. But they clarify things, they check it out, they have some expertise on the committee that puts us in a position to know what the heck we're doing. And frankly, as I've said before, there have been attempts to sort of blame somebody for this $1.2 million loss. That loss is on us. We were not on top of our finances. We owe the city of Geneva 1.2 or 1.5 million, and frankly, we need to know exactly how much we lost on that interest that we were not seeking during that period. That we owe that to the people when we're turning around and asking for a $2 million tax increase. And I'm not a wild man here. I'm asking for regular government performance that is in place all over this community, all over the state, to guard against this very thing, inattention from the elected officials.
Can you articulate what you mean by loss?
So before I come back to it.
He's
no,
asked me a
Time
question.
out.
Yeah.
So there's some speculation on numbers, on loss of numbers. And I just want to caution when we make those statements of what was lost, what wasn't lost, without factual information being provided. So I'm just cautioning.
I agree that
I
we
haven't
should
seen
have
you
a
provide
full-
any factual information of a $1.2 or $1.5 million loss.
The bank estimates that we lost
I-
between 35
Counselor, you're giving verbal information
to the
this
public.
council and to the public
Yes.
that is not factual.
That's not true. The bank will tell you that had that.
I would love the
had
bank
that money
to
been
tell me and
invested-
show me the money.
You're in charge,
Show
sir.
me the money.
You are in charge, sir.
I've asked the bank already.
35, stop potential.
I've asked the bank already, and the bank has not provided me any numbers of $1.2 or $1.5 million losses. I've had that conversation.
Well,
So,
you're
and-
talking
and
to different
Counselor,
people than me.
I appreciate you, I respect you, and I understand where
And I
you're
do
coming
you
from.
too.
But from my point of view, when we talk, and you leverage your conversations, and I try to be a little more neutral about it. I've had conversations with municipalities with committees. I've had conversations with the county. I've had conversations with the county treasurer. And when they learned about these new opportunities for investments, it's something new. And many municipalities with committee structures do not even do this investment yet. So to have a guarantee that a finance committee would correct these issues or prevent these issues is, at this point, an assumption.
That's, couldn't be more wrong. I just asked your CFO when he was here last, what were they doing with our excess, our idle money? And he was putting it into CDs and generating revenue out of it. That stopped at some point?
No.
No.
We continue to do that.
No, but it stopped at the rate that it could have been going, that we had money sitting in accounts with no interest.
Correct. So what we did do in 2024 as part of the budget was identify an outside third party to look at all of our accounts to see how we could best invest taxpayer dollars so it doesn't sit there, because there had been changes since 2019. And knowing that those changes had come the previous year, the county actually had started that, and the county treasurer at the time had brought them in. We had great discussions. We felt it best to have an outside entity look at all of the accounts to really charge our liquidity. So we talk about a liquidity, how we can do that. It's very common for municipalities not to want to invest all of that because we have those big moments where we need that money quickly. Having that party, they helped us see where we can invest. They gave us some strategies. We've then put out a rate quote request, and in my report, I'll talk about where we've invested those funds. But in the meantime, we continued to invest just at a lower interest rate because we needed to do our due diligence and ensure that we had money ready to spend when we needed, as well as we're using our investments from their taxpayers wisely.
I would ask that the first thing that the committee would do would be to investigate the handling of that money over the last year and a half. It speaks to the legitimacy we have with the public on our handling of money. Money was sitting in an account with no interest for more than 2 years. You can trace it to other routes. You can look at new offerings that the government was having and processes that we might need to go through to do certain types of investment. But money sitting in an account with no interest for 2 years is a loss.
Councilor Brennan?
Ironically, it's this very discussion which shows that a finance committee would be very helpful and would have been possibly for the last 12 months. So I have to say I support this too, because I think the information that a finance committee, and I'm not worried about how it's composed yet. But I think the information the Finance Committee could provide would be exactly what we need to make decisions for as a council. Staff already knows where they're at. We don't. We decided not to hire an engagement coordinator, so we're almost a little bit out of touch. And I have to disagree because special sessions are something that we haven't done. We're going to be in our 10th month of council pretty soon. We haven't had that many special sessions. We don't actually go and see each other that often. We don't talk to each other that much. We're not likely to be as informed as a finance committee would provide to us. Does that make sense?
I don't
No,
believe
Pat?
so. I don't agree
Makes
with it
sense.
myself.
Can I-
Yep, please, Councilor Grimaldi.
I don't know if I want to give up any power on this board for the people in my group. So let's say we put a finance committee out, it's Bill, me, and Pete.
Sure.
So now, oh, sorry. So now we're controlling what comes to the council. And so,
It can die in committee.
right, so,
No.
so in comes,
What-
in comes
let Councilor Grimaldi has the floor.
Bid wants the money, comes to us, and we like her. So we say, oh yeah, I think we're gonna bring $200,000 to bid this year, which she would be very happy with. But we also could have something that was really important come in, and it's something that we don't like, and we could just kill it. It would never come to the council.
Council can always vote from any
Well,
committee, and
only
Jim will
if
tell
they,
you that.
only if they know. They
Yeah.
don't have to know.
That's based
And
on the
that's part
structure
of
of
the
the
goal is
committee. You
know
just
what
talked
your
about.
Councilors,
know what your
councilors,
committees are doing.
one at a time,
I don't
please.
know
what your
One
committees
at
are doing.
Councilors, one at a time, and please ask for the floor,
I don't want to
please.
give up the power I have, that the voters asked me to have, to regulate what we're doing. And you know, I agree with you, I think the budget's too high this year. But I don't want to send it to a committee. I want to be able to sit down and say, I think we should do this, or we should do that. And not all of us are going to agree. And if you segment everything down, it's those few people that have the real power to decide what to do.
Councilor Brennan.
I'm not suggesting that the committee consists of strictly council members.
That's a problem, because they're not elected.
Well, it's your zoning board.
Councilor Lavin, please,
your
please,
zoning board,
please.
your
Councilor
planning
Lavin,
board.
Councilor Lavin, when you want to speak, please.
I don't
just
have-
ask for the
Let's have a
floor.
discussion.
I don't have the I don't have the experience to what it would be like, but others in the room do have that experience. I'm thinking out loud here where it said we would meet probably regularly with Adam at any point, and probably Amy, and it could be one or two council members. The intent is to be informed, not to make decisions for the staff. That's not my goal, and I don't think what Councilor Lavin's goal
There's
was.
only 9 of us. It's
That's
not like-
enough.
It's not like there's 20-some, like,
One committee.
So let's back this up a
Okay,
bit,
sure.
because we've heard from legal that if we would like to move a form of committee structure forward and change the charter, that we should meet, have some level of agreement that we want to move this forward, have a public hearing, and put it on the agenda. We're not at the point where we're going to just put it on the agenda. So we need to get together as a council. We need to agree that we want to move the form of committees forward, and then we need to direct staff and legal to start the proceedings from public hearing to local law.
How do you feel about it, Your Honor?
I feel it's adding more red tape. I've had conversations with not just our staff, but on other staffs in other municipalities about finance and finance committees. And there's a long list, when you start bringing people in that don't have municipal finance experience, you have to get them up to speed, you have to monitor it, and the input you're going to get is going to be impartial, but it's going to not be the positive input that you get from staff that works with this on a daily basis. If we give our staff the opportunity to go to the events they need to do, to reach out to our state officials and understand what those rules and regulations are and the opportunities, and you have a great relationship with not just one financial institution, but maybe more than one, to have some level of competition, because it would be nice if our financial institutions would have our best interest at heart also. That's what I feel. So, from what I'm hearing, we need a work session on if we're going to move committees forward. Councilor Peeler.
I would just like to add that never once in the history of ever has adding bureaucracy and increasing the size of the government been more cost effective or produced any efficiency. So, period. Find me one.
We adding a body to this?
Okay,
No,
we're
it's
going
just
to
more
move on.
bureaucracy. It's more time. It's money.
Next is the consideration of meeting minutes for the September 5th meeting. I need a motion. Councilor Petropoulos, seconded by Mayor Valentino. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Sorry, what was
Approval of the meeting minutes.
the, aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye. Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
And my apologies to Supervisor Kennedy. I jumped right over the agenda on you. It's your turn. Our supervisor update by Supervisor Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I knew I should have come to the September meeting, not the October one. Let's do this. I will go through my updates, and then if you want to ask me any questions, not about me, but about the county and our budget process, and I can speak to some things, but only based on your questions. I'd be happy to do that in a manner that's appropriate and consistent with my not being on the Ways and Means Committee and my not being a finance person. So, with that said, there are about 3 or 4 things I just wanted to mention as far as my report, and it's good to see everyone. The first is landfill. Remember that? I'll just give you some update on the New York State Association of Counties fall conference that I attended, and other dates and events, and happy to answer any questions about budget related things that are appropriate for me to respond to. First, on the landfill, as I think you know, some of you received invitations from me really going back to June, when the county started a series of workshops on the future of the landfill. As you may know, the landfill is scheduled per resolution to close effective 2028. The county has been working very hard to promote the community forums that Councilor Brennan attended last week. And then there was a follow-up. There was another forum in Bloomfield, and then a virtual forum. There was a very timely press release that the county sent out today in this very regard. And apparently, around 100 people in all attended and participated in these 3 forums. I counted about 55 people at the Geneva forum. I think there was about 12, 13, I understand from a colleague supervisor of mine in Bloomfield. And then I guess the total was about 100. So do the math, and that's how many people attended the virtual forum. At the workshops leading up to this forum, this was the workshop that was presented by the MSW consultants out of Florida in June and in August. I think I have those dates. There were representatives from Geneva, I am very proud to say, at all of those forums. I was responsible for inviting those people to those workshops because I am not a landfill expert. And I think the council should be very proud also of the fact that individuals from the city took time out of their schedules and went to Canandaigua to those sessions and also attended the town session. The press release, which I believe the city will get shortly, talks about when the end date is for a decision to be made, which I see the board chair, Supervisor Campbell, has indicated that the hope is for a decision to be made related to all of the input related to the MSW consultants report and so forth, that decision would be made by the end of this year. So that was news to me also. I think that the hope had been by October, but there was a lot of good input, so that has to be reviewed. That's that, and you'll be hearing more about that, I'm sure, if not through me. Okay, so I did attend the State Association of Counties Fall Conference. I attended several sessions on mental health competency for someone who is committed to a mental health institution. I didn't realize this. It can cost up to $1,400 a day for their care. And so the state is wanting counties to absorb the costs for all of that. So that's a hot county level issue. I also attended the Environment and Energy Committee meeting because of where we live in between landfills and also a Bitcoin mine down on our Seneca Lake. I also attended a domestic violence session. The New York State Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team is an executive session, is an executive office initiative started by the previous governor, I think in 2015. Its objective is to look at the New York State response to prevention of domestic and gender-based violence, which accounts for a large percentage of homicides in New York State. And between 2018 and 2022, of 495 domestic homicides in New York, 68% of those were partner violence. Ontario County Sheriff's Department is looking at, related to that, a lethality assessment program. There's one in Maryland that they're looking at. This allows there to be a more immediate and comprehensive response when there is a call for that. And this program is really for all first responders in New York State. So the county is looking at that program. A couple of dates I want to share with you. So it was an excellent conference, by the way. The dates and events that are coming up that I think are of interest to constituents as well as counselors is the electronic waste recycling event, Saturday, October 12th. That's at the landfill. The number to call to make your reservation, which is necessary for that, 585-393-3090. Computers, faxes, keyboards, DVDs, projectors, anything electronic.
TVs?
Televisions, yes. A second date worth noting, I believe, for this group and for our constituents is the Ontario County Cooperative Extension Fall Festival Open House, October 19th from at the 4-H camp at Camp Bristol. That's, I think, runs all day. Tuesday, October 22nd, Ontario County Soil and Water. This is a 8:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. program on stormwater management techniques. This is going to be provided by a engineering firm, and that's at 480 North Main Street in Canandaigua. Finally, just so folks know, City Council has been afforded a presentation also by the county's Housing Ad Hoc Committee. There was one on September 10th, and that was presented in the town of Phelps. So those workshops are continuing. Speaking of workshops, my final point will be based on the budget discussion that you are having. The county had its budget workshop on September 19th. I am not here to speak to that because that's ongoing, but it is a parallel process. It's a process that's overseen by the Ways and Means Committee of the board. And even though, as I said, I'm not on the Ways and Means Committee, board members such as myself attend either in person, I attended virtually, and it's a full day presentation. The presentation includes department heads making their presentations on their 2024 asks, and along with rationales, and all personnel and fringe benefits, everything is costed out and justifications are provided. Again, that's a full day session, and not all the way, and that's not a committee meeting, that's a separate budget meeting. Ways and Means Committee, which Supervisor Venuti from the town and Supervisor Guard from the city sit on that. They meet every 3 weeks. That is a public meeting, and public does attend all these committee meetings. I mean, not all the time, but they are open and publicized. What comes out of those committee meetings typically gets approved by the board. The minutes for those meetings are available to any of us 21 supervisors to read prior to the board meeting, and we are urged by the board chair to read those minutes and to know what we're voting on. So that's how that works. It really is like a series of waterfalls, is the best way to describe it. So I am not here, however, to talk about the county budget. There is, to my understanding, and a meeting that I have been invited to with previously this summer with the board chair, county administrator, assistant county administrator, city manager, and the mayor, where they meet. I don't know how often that group meets, but that is a regular intersection of both governance and administration at both levels of government. So my role here is really not even icing on the cake. It's really just a sideshow. So those are, whether it's the committees reporting to the Board of Supervisors or those meetings that I just described. I don't know how often they happen. I was privileged, though, to be able to attend one of those. So those are sort of regular, ongoing sessions. The committee meetings, of course, are bound by Robert's Rules of Order. Those meeting minutes are approved and hopefully read, certainly by committee members, but also by all the rest of the members of the board. I bring that up just based upon what I heard before, but if there's any questions of me since I'm here, I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Councilor Peeler.
What was the phone number and the location for the e-waste drop-off? I was going to Google it, but I was having connectivity.
Oh, no, that's quite all right. Phone number is
It was 394
393
393.
3090, 585-393-3090.
And where was the location? Was it in Bristol or was it?
No, that will be at the
At
landfill.
the landfill this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I don't know, it must be the stars have aligned. I've had more questions in the past week about where can I bring my TVs and old stuff. People are cleaning maybe for winter, I don't know. But now I'm gonna post it.
Councilor Petropoulos. I'm sorry, Mayor, I'll leave it to you.
Sorry.
The number you gave, of course, is somebody got to register for ahead of time, correct?
That is correct.
I think we got a load too. Thanks.
Mr. Kennedy, I think you already answered
Councilor
it, but as you know, we were talking about how to go about possibly committeeizing some finance information. How many committees do operate, if you will, for the Board of Supervisors? 3, 4, 5, 6?
I think there's 6.
6.
Mhm.
And I think you said that they meet on a, kind of, obviously on a periodic basis.
Every
and
3
meetings
weeks.
Every 3 weeks, and
Mhm.
minutes are taken.
Correct.
And those minutes therefore are presented to the Board of Supervisors about a week in advance of any given regular meeting?
That's a good question.
In a good month?
So the minutes are approved at each committee meeting the following, in the next time that they meet.
Okay.
The minutes are available for all of us to look at. They are posted almost immediately right after each committee meeting, so that if I'm not on Ways and Means, even though I tend to attend that one, I can attend it virtually. But yeah, those meeting minutes are available for me to review.
Thank you.
Councilor Lavin.
I appreciate your interaction with us here, and I just got another one from your boss in the county that said, we do have a cash management and investment policy here at the county. We have had such a policy at the county since 1987. We do invest our funds to maximize interest returns. It's great to see him interacting with us like that.
His boss is the electors.
The county's administrator, sorry.
Any further questions for Supervisor Kennedy? Supervisor Kennedy, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next on our agenda is public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes unless you've requested a longer period of time. The only person I currently have signed up is Judy Salati, who would like some extra time. So Judy?
Amy, I'm not here to talk about floods, and I'm not here to talk about the budget. But, Council and Mr. Mayor, thank you for listening to me tonight. I'm Judy Salati, and I live at 176 Genesee Street. And I have something else to talk about, completely different than what you've been talking about tonight. I'm sure that you've all seen the picture and read the article in the Finger Lakes Times about noting the toxic algae blooms. And have you actually gone down to the lakefront or to the visitor center to see the pea soup water, the dead fish washed up on the beach, or to get a whiff of the awful rotting smell? According to the Finger Lakes Times, it is the worst that it's ever been. Headlines in the DNC: algae blooms spread across nearly every Finger Lake, and now our beautiful Seneca Lake, so spectacular and thought by millions as being a gift from God, has now been added to the list. Fishermen, locally and from around the country, who have fished the Finger Lakes for years, have expressed concern for a long time. The fish just aren't there anymore, they say, and comment that the natural grasses, too, have disappeared. I heard someone caught a big 9-pound smallmouth bass and made the comment, "How can you say there are no big fish in the lake?" Our professional fishermen will say, "Okay, you can get a big fish now and then, because the weeds and the grasses that they used to hide in are gone. But those fish will disappear too, because the grasses and the weeds that have disappeared or are disappearing, for whatever reason, the fish will have no place to lay their eggs." There are those that just want to be able to take a swim in the lake or take a boat ride without a lot of weeds or grass to contend with. Well, right now, one may not have any weeds and have a nice sandy lake, but you will have a poisonous pea soup, foul-smelling lake that prevents you from swimming at all or taking a boat ride even. Someone else may say, "I don't fish, I don't have lake property, and I don't like to swim in the lake anyway." That's me, I don't like to swim in lakes. Remember the professional fishermen that commented about the condition of our lake and the declining fish numbers? Well, none of the national or major fishing tournaments came to this area this year, and there are no plans for them to return. This loss of business to our region can have a financial impact on the restaurants, hotels, the Walmarts, the Bass Pro Shop, and all of the gas stations in the area, and over time potentially can have a permanent impact on the economic stability of our lake, of our area, excuse me. Then there's the person that just doesn't want to be bothered. I have to ask, how would you feel if your taxes went up? And by the way, where do you get your water supply? Without getting too dramatic, but at the same time being realistic, I have to ask, what if you or a member of your family was diagnosed with cancer, and the cause was found to be directly related back to the toxic spraying of our lake? Would you be concerned then? So let's talk about the infamous hydrilla plant. We've all been hearing about that. It's an invasive plant coming originally from Florida into Florida in the 1950s. It can disrupt water flow in reservoirs, hamper drainage and irrigation canals, and decrease dissolved oxygen in the water, which results in fish kill, and it can crowd out and outcompete native water plants. It's a nasty plant that grows rapidly and nobody likes it, and has now become one of the most invasive marine plants in the Western Hemisphere. And according to some, it has now reached upstate New York and the Finger Lakes. So it's nothing to mess around with. I just read yesterday that the Great Lakes is also dealing with this problem. And they have researchers looking into it, and they're finding it's not what's growing in the lake, it's what's going into the lake. Skaneateles leaders have not used herbicides because the lake is their primary source of water. Owasco and Cayuga Lake have in fact sprayed their lakes with herbicides. And if you travel to the north end of Cayuga Lake, you will see nothing but brown water and no notable plant life. And as of Saturday, there was algae bloom covering all of Cayuga Lake. It has not been confirmed, but there were sightings of herbicide spraying on Seneca Lake in July of this year. And coincidentally, we now have massive algae blooms all along the north side of the lake, extending down to Willard on the east side and down to Long Point on the west side. It has also been noted in these areas that there is very little vegetation with nothing but sand. The farmer has been accused of causing the algae blooms by using the herbicides in their gardens. First of all, they're under strict regulations about the use of herbicides. But after a recent major rainstorm, and we've had many, creek water was tested, and there was no unregulated herbicides found. Some say the algae blooms are just related to the warm weather. It's no big deal, and it'll just go away when it cools down. My question is, then, if that is true, what is causing the fish to die, and the grass and the weeds to disappear, and the lake waters to turn murky? So I ask, is hydrilla actually the problem? Because we hear a lot about it's the hydrilla. Is our lake in fact being sprayed with herbicides? We don't know that for sure, but we see what looks like spraying. If the spraying is taking place, who is making the decision to spray and why? Who is doing the spraying and what herbicides are being used? There are herbicides that can effectively kill the hydrilla and not harm the natural grasses and weeds, if in fact it is the hydrilla that's the problem. And most importantly, what are the long-term effects of herbicides on us, our lakes, and our wildlife? These are all important questions that must be answered before our lake is beyond recovery. These are all important questions that must be addressed, and it has been said that someone said not that has knowledge of the herbicides, that what's being used right now is causing irreversible damage to our lakes as we speak. I don't know that to be true. I don't know that to be true for sure, but it is something certainly to be thinking about. Communication, education, and above all, transparency is crucial in order to solve this problem before it is too late. It's imperative that we learn and take advantage of the great research that is being done all over the country, and not just going by a little study. Mr. Mayor, you've heard me talk about legacies, and Geneva has had its fair share. Decisions and mistakes made many years ago, you've had to address on your time in office. This issue, however, is on your time and your council's time. And what will your legacy be? I admit this is not just a Geneva issue. It's not just a county issue. It's not even just a state issue. It's a country issue. And we all must play a part. And I encourage you and this council and Mr. Mayor to look diligently into this problem and be a part of finding solutions. And just so you know, I'm going to be also sending this on to our governor and our state senators. Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, did you want an opportunity to speak? Did you want an opportunity to speak? Okay, earlier you asked if you could say something. Now would be the time. Okay. All right. No further comment. We'll move on the agenda. Next is the city manager report.
All right. No comment would be great. All right. Thanks, Councilor Grimaldi. Just a couple of quick comments. City grants. I know that we had a request from council for an overview on our grants, and we just welcomed our new grants coordinator who began last Monday on September 23rd, and she's working on that. So you'll have something later this month that gives an overview of all of the grants that we have in-house right now. Investment update: with the implementation of our new investment policy, we have now invested $10.85 million in funds with Lions National Bank for 6 to 18 months investment period, and an additional $4.25 million with Customers Bank of Rybrook, New York. So we'll continue to expand our portfolio as we've discussed previously. Lake Tunnel Enhancement Project. Our crews are continuing to work on the Lakefront Trail Tunnel under Routes 5 and 20 near Solar Village. This is part of the DRI program. The project includes site demolition of pavers, installation of drainage features, placement of architectural enhancements, repairs and renovations to the tunnel, and some landscaping features. Work is expected to take several weeks. If you're a pedestrian or a bicycle, you may be detoured while that work is going on. At the last council meeting, there was questions about mulching and grooming trails and parks. This is something that Buildings and Grounds does annually. They place mulch in all the parks in the spring of fall seasons. They also groom all the trails at that time. It's been a longer grass mowing season. Grass has been growing due to some of the rain and other things happening, so they have not had as much maintenance, but they continue to do that. As the grass mowing season begins to wind down, you'll see Buildings and Grounds in the parks more as part of the annual fall maintenance. Another question was about televising of our sewer, our sanitary and storm sewer lines. As part of our annual maintenance program, the city does have contractors televise sanitary and storm sewer lines for various reasons. Some of those reasons are to diagnose repairs, to perform cleaning services, and anytime we slip line a line. So slip lining a line puts a small coating through that line to make it so things don't come out of the line. It has to be televised. This means in some cases, some of our lines are televised multiple times within a few-year period. I do want to make it clear, though, that we are not televising our lines due to loss of video. The videos are all maintained not only locally, but they're also maintained by our contractors. The Planning and Economic Development Strategy has been begun to be rolled out. I know some council members attended that first initial session, and there will be more. The strategy is also available through our Planning and Economic Development Office. It is a draft document at this point, so as people look at that, if there are revisions, I know some council members have already let me know they have some ideas on those revisions, and the LDC, IDA, and BID will be also looking at it because all of our economic development partners are part of that strategy. Stormwater Task Force met again last month. I wasn't able to join that meeting, and they'll be meeting again this month. They're working on preparing their report for council with recommendations around communications, infrastructure improvements, and then wellness and safety items. So that team will be bringing those forward. Also, the fire department storm trailer has arrived, and it's been outfitted with submersible pumps, other items that can then go on delivery during those storm events. Our former OEO site request for qualifications is out. We have heard from at least 3 developers interested in submitting to the RFQ. The deadline to submit those qualifications is October 21st, 2024. For more information, if a developer is interested in looking at that site, they can reach out to Director West of our Planning and Economic Development Department. And then our final thing that we announced in September, but I'll remind everyone, trick-or-treating in the city will occur on October 31st, so it will be done on Halloween.
Moving on.
There is a parade too, but not that day. I can't remember when the parade is, but maybe Councilor Whitfield has it in his recreation updates.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business.
Or not.
Resolution 60-2024, adoption of amended levels of real property tax exemptions for senior citizens under real property tax law, section 467, presented by our city manager.
Yes, so as discussed previously in the budget discussion, this resolution would amend our exemption levels, and it would align with the county exemption levels, allowing our seniors to receive additional exemptions. So they would receive an exemption. It is a cost sharing, is that the right term for it, on it?
Passes it over.
Yes. So what would happen is those exemptions would be taken off the total taxable assessed value of the community, and then you would have a slight increase for all of those not experiencing those exemptions, which amounts to around 2 cents, depending on what your tax rate is. But usually it's around 2 cents of an increase for everyone not experiencing that exemption.
Need a motion? Counselor Petropoulos, second by Counselor Grimaldi. Discussion?
I think
Counselor Brennan, were you there?
I think this, you stated this earlier, not tonight, but how many people do you anticipate this is actually going to affect? I recall just a few dozen, I think.
What's the difference between ours and the county?
I want to say it's a few dozen, you're right. It's between 30 and 50 is what we're assuming.
Okay.
Again, it is based on their participation, so we will have to wait and see. We've already seen some increased participation with our current levels because we notified people that we offer this. That's another piece, is some people just weren't even aware that they could have the exemption. When you leave today, you'll notice the assessor also has all of the exemptions right outside of her office, so people can get all of the various exemptions they're eligible for.
Counselor Grimaldi?
The county already has this level, so people are already putting it into the assessor's office. So basically, all she's gonna have to do is just, anybody that's doing, the county one just will automatically get the city one. So there really isn't like they have another form or anything else, it's all,
Right.
it's just adding one more in, it's
All right.
what it is. So it isn't like a lot of work for people, and it pretty much, you can tell exactly who it's gonna be because it's who's applying for the county now.
I think Cyril's idea for us would be a much bigger impact on the seniors of the community.
What's that? Get 50% off your taxes?
No, just lower the tax rates so that people get a break this year.
Yeah, well,
Any other discussion?
Yeah.
I needed a clarification, because when we put it up on the sheet, and the assessor's not here to answer the question, but there was actually seniors who are going to pay more?
no.
But that's only based on new assessment?
That would be on their new
Okay.
assessment
Okay.
level. So
I just
they
wanna
would
make sure.
still pay less than before, but with their new assessment level, they might pay more.
Right, so this will benefit them depending on what they.
Yes.
It benefits the most. Husband and wife, the husband dies, he had the pension, he had social security. The wife is now getting his social security, but it's $2,000 a month. So now she's trying to live on $24,000 to stay in her house, where before, she was maybe getting 1,500, he was getting 2,000, and he was getting another 2,000, and, so she takes this big hit, and, the question always was, do you want that kind of person to stay in their house? Well, in my opinion, I want them to stay in their house if they can try. This just helps them, knock down the numbers a little bit. If
Very little.
if that helps any.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Gilat? Oh, he's absent. Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
People?
Next is a resolution 61-2024, authorizing the execution of sale documents for city-owned property located at 30 Castle Street, presented by our city attorney.
So about a year and a half ago, City Council had a public hearing and approved the sale of a small piece of property located kind of in the rear of 30 Castle Street. It's approximately 600 square feet. It was approved already a year and a half ago. For various reasons, we never got to closing, so we are just, because of the passage of time, we were just asking this council to ratify authorizing city manager to execute the document so we can close this out, get paid, and transfer the property.
Need a motion?
Motion.
Counselor Peeler, seconded by Counselor Petropoulos. Any discussion? Clerk,
Where
please.
is this? Where is the property? I mean, is it over in the parking lot?
It's on the back side, yep.
So is it like that little alleyway that goes to the corner
Yeah.
store?
It's a little
Off
triangle.
the side of the alleyway, yeah.
Yep.
Where they come out and,
Yep.
okay.
It's a
I
triangle
just didn't know
property.
where it was,
Yep.
that's all.
The spot where they keep their garbage cans will actually be their property now.
Oh, yeah, that's always good.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Moving on to new business, Resolution 62-2024, surplus equipment from the police department, presented by our city manager.
I think so.
I'm guessing.
Yes. So this is a bunch of surplus equipment that the chief has promised to bring forward to go ahead and sell at auction. You'll see there's a variety of different items in there, including everything from holsters and belts to some of our retired vehicles. And so this is a surplus.
Need a motion? Counselor Peeler, seconded by Counselor Morocco. Discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is Resolution 63-2024, Assessor Shared Services, presented by our city manager.
Yes, so this is a resolution. We currently share services for information technology services as well as an assessor. When we initially started this, we only shared the assessor position. We didn't share a tax clerk. Instead, we had staff in both the city of Geneva and city of Canandaigua fill that role. What we found during a time of not having that is having that shared person that is in both cities is more beneficial to us because they're working as a team in conjunction in both municipalities. The city of Canandaigua has already reviewed and approved this. It has to be done by both municipalities.
Need a motion? Counselor Petropoulos, seconded by Counselor Morocco. Discussion, Counselor Peeler.
Quick question, don't we have a tax clerk here now?
No,
Well, no,
She resigned.
she resigned.
So it's an empty position?
We don't have a tax clerk at this point, no.
Because I know they took the tax clerk out and because there was nothing on the list and put in a secretary instead.
The person that was filling that role resigned, and we have not refilled that role. So instead, what we did in the meantime is actually had them temporarily during the reval step in. And so this would just take, so funding-wise, we're just taking the money that we had from the previous
understand.
and moving it
Okay,
to that.
So we are eliminating that position here.
Yes, we don't have that position here.
so quick
So
question.
Adam's gonna lose a person.
No, it was not under
It was under the controller's office.
it was half under controller and planning and economic
That was
development.
under the controller's office.
Yeah.
You stepped all over Counselor Peeler there. Counselor
No.
Peeler, you want to finish?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm good for it.
Yeah.
It's right in line with what
Okay.
but I have different questions. Thank you for starting some new ones.
Okay. Sorry.
So, how long has the position not been filled?
Since spring, I don't remember exactly when Haley left.
Springworks.
I'm looking. Yeah, like it was right.
A couple quarters.
after I started.
Yes.
Okay.
And so what we did in the meantime is we had just a one-off contractual
Okay.
with Thomas to get us through the reval. Thomas is the position that works, our person that works in this position in Canandaigua, so we
Thank you.
shared, and now we would extend that.
I just want the collective populace to know that we're not just starting new labor agreements and creating redundancies, and we've got people in offices, so that we're actually, doing our due diligence to
Yes.
create effective practices and be efficient and mindful of cost. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That would have been nice to have that in the background. No offense, with all due respect, to have that in the background of the agenda packet. We didn't
Yep.
really have that.
So, as I studied the budget, this is probably a good example. And it's kind of a request, recommendation, or maybe an addendum to the budget. But anytime we have a revenue and an expense that offset each other in different portions of the budget, it'd be nice if we had like a little asterisk that says see page XYZ, so that we can understand that revenue and the offsetting expenditure or vice versa. Just something that, I know I've had that challenge before, going back and forth on the pages trying to find it.
I'll make a note.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.
Maybe even smaller print. Can we have that too?
Yes, pictures would be good. Yeah.
All set? Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Aye.
Counselor Paler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Shaw is absent. Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolution 64-2024, establishing a public hearing to override the tax cap for the city, city manager, excuse me.
Yes, so this is a resolution just to establish a public hearing to override the tax cap. As we've discussed, this has become standard practice for this municipality. With the proposed budget, if that were to go forward, that would have to have this in place. It has been practiced even if it hasn't. That's all I have on that one.
Are you making a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we table this until we get into the budget session to see if we're going to need it.
Well, it's not even on the floor yet, so it can't be tabled yet.
Well,
Gotta make a motion.
Yeah, we gotta make a motion to put it on the floor. Motion to put it on the floor. Counselor Peeler,
No
second.
motion, no, no, no.
Oh, no
That was
motion?
me saying no.
Okay.
So it's gonna die.
I'll make a motion. Any second? Okay.
So it's just gonna die.
Yes, it dies. Okay, great. You might bring it back, you might not.
It'll come back.
Okay. Next, moving on. Resolution setting public hearing for sale of city-owned property located at 41 Lake Street by our city attorney.
Okay, so this one is, basically, we are setting a public hearing to authorize the sale of this property at 41 Lake Street. In 2012, the city leased that property to the current tenant. As part of that lease agreement, the tenant has the right to exercise a option to purchase the property, and that tenant has advised us that he intends to do so. So we have a contractual obligation to pursue that, but our process to follow before we can transfer property is to conduct a public hearing, and then this council has to approve that before we can proceed any further with this transaction.
Thank you. I need a motion.
Make the motion.
Counselor Grimaldi, seconded by Counselor Peeler. Any discussion?
Do we know how much he's paid in rent?
I believe that it's 171,000 over the last
that
12
was-
years.
The original agreement was that he would
Yes.
pay
Yep.
the total out
Yep.
in rent. And this year was the year that it broke.
Yep.
Right.
So as long as he's paid it, I don't have a problem.
I believe that's the case, and the way that the numbers work is that if he's exercising it, then he pays sort of the purchase price minus what he's paid in rent, which is no less than $5,000. So the delta gets you to about $175,000.
Right, and that's what he originally bid.
Right.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next on the agenda is Resolution 66-2024, flexible work arrangement by our city manager.
Yes, so this goes back to practices that we've been doing that don't have policies around them. And so we have been doing some flexible work arrangements for our management and non-represented employees, and this puts a policy around what we are already doing.
Any motion?
Make a motion.
Counselor Brennan, seconded by Counselor Lavin. Any discussion?
So what's the policy?
The policy allows flexibility in work locations and work hours for management and non-represented employees,
As long as they okay with you.
as long as it's okay with their supervisor
Yeah.
in advance.
Yes.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Brennan?
Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Nay.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is Resolution 67-2024, 2025 city manager budget reduction by Counselor Lavin.
This is my effort to redirect our budget reviews here to set a lower amount that would still give some flexibility on the outstanding negotiations, but would signal to the community that we're taking seriously the assessment impacts this year.
The resolution is fairly specific, Counselor? Would you-
Yes, it's $2 million reduction from the proposed current levy, and asking the manager to come back to us with suggested cuts to get us there.
Okay, do I need a motion? Are you making that motion? Counselor
Making.
Lavin, seconded by Counselor Brennan. Discussion. Okay, this is, as I'm reading it, from 10.160898 to 8.160898. And without knowing the specific impact of the city, I definitely cannot support this. Counselor Petropoulos?
I think we should meet first and consider Counselor Peeler's suggestion that we go for a more realistic 4%-ish rather than giving him a fixed figure to cut. I think that's at least worthy of a meeting. So if it were, it's probably too late to table it until the first meeting, but I mean, definitely we want to do something, but this is a little too specific, I think.
Take an amendment.
You can amend, you can table it.
You can table it, you can amend it, you can do a lot of things.
Let's discuss it.
Until our.
We have a motion to table by Counselor Petropoulos. Second,
I'll second.
Counselor Grimaldi.
I think we need to.
Clerk, please call the roll. Once we table, no more discussion.
Counselor
Once we-
Brennan?
Nay.
Counselor Lavin?
No.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Nay.
Mayor Valentino?
Nay.
Profiles encouraged.
Back to the original resolution as written.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
All right. Counselor Brennan?
This is a vote to
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 direct,
accept this
Well,
as
be
written.
specific,
I believe I understand it correctly.
whereas the 2024 assessment significantly shifting the increase in municipal tax burden, be it resolved that the city council order the city manager to reduce her proposed budget 2025 in ways that will reduce the projected 2025 levy by $2 million from her original 2025 proposal. That's exactly what it is.
Thank you. Clerk, if you'd start again.
Counselor Brennan?
Yes. Aye.
Counselor Lavin?
Aye.
Counselor Peeler?
Nay.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Nay.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Nay.
Counselor Morocco?
Nay.
Counselor Whitfield?
Aye.
Mayor Valentino?
Nay.
Motion defeated.
Next is appointments to boards and commissions. Do we have any?
I only have one currently, and we have some applications that we're still reviewing, and we're still imploring people to still apply. Planning board, zoning board, specifically zoning board, we just need more applicants, and it was a uninspiring turnout, but we're still reviewing, and we have some board members that are still weighing in on the current applicants. The current applicant I have that was vetted by the Police Budget Review Board was Paul D'Amico to be served as an alternate.
Okay, that's a motion.
That's yes.
Do we have a second? Counselor Petropoulos, discussion. Clerk, please call the roll on the appointment.
Counselor Brennan?
Nay.
Counselor Lavin?
Nay.
Counselor Peeler?
Aye.
Counselor Grimaldi?
Aye.
Counselor Petropoulos?
Aye.
Counselor Morocco?
Aye.
Counselor Whitfield?
Nay.
Mayor Valentino?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is mayor and council reports, and I'll start at my right and work my way around. Counselor Brennan.
Well, there's not much to report except that I did deliver $275 this morning to City Hall, thanks to Tom Burrell for firewood sales. The Shade Tree Committee did meet once, and it was business as usual, nothing earth-shaking. It was kind of like keeping an eye on the existing inventory. I guess I'll retract that. We did make an earth-shaking move. Hobart and William Smith, through a fellow named Drew Rojek, who was their buildings and grounds supervisor, is very agreeable to accepting all the large trees that the Shade Tree Committee can provide to them, because there's multiple streets that they could use them on. So that was a big push. The Historic Districts Commission did not meet. There was no particular applications for it. And that's it.
Council Lavin.
Your Honor, one of my Ward 1 constituents made an offer on a piece of land at the end of the sidewalk down on South Main Street, and received an email from the city saying that the request has been rejected. This was it's Dan McGowan's property, so you might remember the discussion. And when we had the discussion, because it involved land, there was an executive session, but one of the issues I raised was this is going to add to take land that's off the tax roll and put it on the tax roll, and I wanted to know what impact that might have on, and whether or not the committee as assigned and not identified in the information to him has the authority to do that rejection, or should it come to the council to be reported that we're rejecting an effort to get land back on the tax roll so that the council can validate that decision. We did do that validation when Dave West brought up the other properties that were going to be put on the market, and we voted on those. It was a little opaque to the constituent here that we wasn't clear who was making that decision and not exactly why the decision was made when he was going to be adding land to the tax rolls, which is, I assume, should be a priority with us. I'm just wondering if we can take a look at how we identify that decision. As far as I know, it was only discussed. There was a discussion in executive session, but not the kind of communication that I think somebody offering to buy land from this unused land from the city should get. So, if there's a way to address that going forward.
It's a good question, and I'm pausing because executive session material is executive session material.
Yeah, I realize that. I didn't talk about the substance of it, but just that there was a discussion in there, but we never voted.
Well, no, there wasn't a vote. I gotta be cautious here.
Steve, you want me to?
No,
No.
I don't want to violate executive
No,
session
it has
material.
nothing to do
I
with
can
the
start.
executive session. It
I-
has to do with the way the city sells property.
If I may.
It was never declared surplus.
Correct.
If it's not declared surplus, we don't even take a bid on it.
Correct.
So it was never open to the public to bid on it.
Correct.
It was just somebody coming to the city and saying, geez, I like this piece of property the city owns. Well, the city has buildings on that property, because it's down on the point where we have things, and the staff said no. And it really shouldn't even have come to us.
So let the city manager.
I'll just talk about the process. So we declare surplus property through a resolution. Those surplus properties can be sold, and those are all in public. When we receive an offer for a piece of property or a bid, the comptroller, the assessor, the planning and economic development director, the coordinator of zoning and building, I'm sure there's other people I'm forgetting, that come together, look at that, and then in executive session bring that forward to council. Council then discusses that and the merits. The staff also discusses the merits as they look at them. If council says, let's have further discussion about this parcel, then we will move that forward, and then it becomes public session. When it's not moved forward in those conversations, there's not a willingness to put forward a resolution, it then we notify, staff then notifies who've been notified that this is not going forward. We're not declaring this surplus. So that has been how the process has gone. And those discussions are done in executive session because it's real property. I think that's all. David, is there anything else that I missed?
No, you covered it.
Thank you.
Okay. Council Levin, are you all set right now?
Yeah, I just think we can be better communicating with a citizen who wants to put land on the tax rolls, to tell them that it's been rejected by council. In this case, from the discussion I recall, I still had questions about how much tax money are we turning away in perpetuity by keeping that off the tax rolls, and never got an answer to that, and assumed it would come to council in some form to say we're rejecting it. And so he can be informed of what he's trying to do something good. He's brought up a number of pieces of property. I know you don't like them, but
It has nothing to do with like somebody. I'm
Well-
not sure who's going back and forth. I think your point is well taken, okay?
we can communicate better.
Yep, okay. Councilor Peeler?
Is this a discussion or a resolution to sell the property?
No, this right now is our
As my council
mayor and council
report.
reports.
Oh, okay, because this is old news for me, because we've talked about this for the past 5 years.
Council, let's go with
Yeah,
reports, please.
okay.
You got any reports?
Oh, okay. Are you conceding the floor? Okay, very good. So the planning board did not meet this past month, and just for my own take on this, I was really thrilled to be the liaison of the planning board. But now it's troubling to me because when there's nothing going on the planning board, that means there's nothing going on in Geneva, and the planning board hasn't met for the better part of 2 quarters. So I think it's been 3 or 4 months since maybe 5 months since they've had a legitimate meeting. I think 4 months. So I just hope to see more development going on in the city, because that usually will go through the planning board. And to kind of segue into development, I would like to just kind of bring to the floor, I just read in the paper yesterday, or it was Finger Lakes One maybe, that the city of Canandaigua had a developers roundtable that was kind of co-sponsored with the town of Canandaigua, and maybe it was the LDC was part of it too, or I could be misquoting the acronyms. But what was really cool about this developers roundtable was the developers actually just spoke truths to these communities and said, this is what we see as far as your communities, and this is how we assess your attractiveness from the standpoint of development. And I think if we're going to include that in our economic development situation, I would hope the public would be involved, and we can, because I think we need to be told these truths about what our community has going for it or against it, based in the eyes of the people that are going to be doing the development. So that's
It's a great strategy.
Kind of just what I hope to see in the future. I do want to also kind of make some notes about our lake and the Habs, and a lot of people want to find things to blame. And I've sat in on a number of watershed meetings just because of my job videotaping them. And from the biggest culprit that I think people don't acknowledge enough is the invasive species of the zebra mussels and the quagga mussels. Those items are filtering out all the good nutrients in the lake. They are allowing more photons to get deeper into the water. So while we all like clear water to swim in, I don't think we fully understand that these invasive species are actually allowing the Habs and the blue-green algae specifically to flourish. Because all of us who can remember the 80s and the 90s when the lake was just muddy and murky and the northern pike were everywhere, right? And the weeds were everywhere and the fish were huge and awesome and plentiful. But that dirty lake also prevented the photons from getting deep into the lake. The blue-green algae is native. It's been here. It's always been here. And blue-green algae produces, I think it's upwards of the majority of the oxygen for the entire planet. So blue-green algae is not a villain. We have a lake that's ecosystem was always dominoes or a house of cards. And because of invasive species messing with the balance of nature, we now have a very complicated and expensive and maybe unsolvable problem. Because I don't think we can get rid of the zebras or quaggas, because even lakes that are landlocked have had a hard time controlling them. And we're not landlocked. The reason why we have these invasive species is because we're connected to the St. Lawrence River. So I think it's important to not try to find the scapegoats of so much human activity, except for the human activity that causes these invasive species to mess with our lake that flourished during the dirtiest of times. All right, because it did. And that's what kept the Habs down. We had a different problem. We had lots of E. coli in the lake, but not so much toxic bacteria. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Councilor Grimaldi.
Okay, so I go to the Geneva Housing Authority meetings, And their biggest thing right now is they just got a $4.5 million grant to replace a lot of the heating over at Courtyard. Courtyard, the state inspected the Courtyard came out really good, but their scattered sites took a little abuse. They have a 95% occupancy rate right now from the apartments that can be rented. They're redoing a certain number at Courtyard, and they're just finishing up the high-rise over here. Their budget came up, and they passed a new budget that started yesterday, and it runs through next September. So that's basically what's going on with them.
All set? Yep. Councilor Petropoulos?
Okay, first off, as concerns the lake, yes, my wife smelled it. She takes walks by there every day. I remember the East River when I was growing up back in the day. That really stank. For those who may not be aware, my wife is basically signed us up for the Seneca Lake Pure Waters Association. We went to their dinner that they had down, I think it was in Watkins Glen. They're making whatever efforts they can make, so if you're not familiar with them, look them up on Google. They are actually doing what they can to stay on top of all of this. Otherwise, I talk to Assemblyman Gallahan all the time. I certainly will mention what the state DEC has in mind, if anything. I know they were able to take some action on Cayuga Lake next door. I don't know if they've done so here, but it's very valid we drink this water. At the same time, there's no point trying to vilify anybody or any one entity. I think it's a combination of the perfect yuck, and that's kind of where we're at with that. So otherwise, the LDC met today, and the economic strategy meeting is going to get wrapped up. We should have that in hand by the end of the month. They're going to add their own revenue generation because it's pretty obvious the city can't fund the LDC certainly for the short term, if not, the LDC is going to do what it can to generate income because I know they help with development. And let's see, they approved the strategic plan. So that meeting, everybody might have been at. I couldn't make that meeting. My wife went in my place. She gave it good reviews. So she says it's good. It's good. Otherwise, it's been a lot of quality of life stuff in Ward 5. There were some issues that constituents had with the quality or manner of remediation around the old foundry site. I looked into it. I did contact Assemblyman Gallahan on that. I sent reports from Jackson Street was the main place where they had issues. A lot of it was pointed at bad subcontractors, but we don't know for certain. The state's looking into that. I saw it for myself. I have my own opinions, but it was certainly worth bringing up. Let's see. We had other flooding issues on State Street and the Finger Lakes Railway culverts. They have track ditches on either side of the rails, and those have culverts that go under their tracks, under State Street, but as far as anyone can ascertain, those are not in any way connected to our own drainage. They're clogged up to about 3 inches from the top of what looks like a very large pipe. So I finally got someone on the phone today. I talked to them about maybe just clearing that out. It's not a big deal. Ballast will wash into it until it's cleaned out. The water in the culverts won't drain through the pipes. It'll just build up, wash debris out, and flood State Street going downhill. So hopefully I'll hear something from them in the next couple of days. The other thing, really the last thing is I've gotten some constituents concerned about street lamps being out on certain areas of Ward 5. In particular, there's a bit of a trouble spot on Castle Street between Elm and Main. 2 to 3 lights were out on the Chichino side. That would be the south side of Castle Street. If I got my directions right. Yeah, south side. And Director Venuti has been made aware of it. I haven't done a drive-by yet, but he assured me it would get addressed shortly. Let's hope that's the case. There's another series of lampposts on Lake Street and Lake and Exchange. I haven't even gotten a look at that one yet, but I'll have a look. And finally, if everyone is free or anyone is free, Veterans Day, November 11th at 10 a.m., we're dedicating a bench that the LDC helped the Freemasons put up. The lodge built the bench, and the LDC paid for the slab. It will be dedicated that day at 10 a.m. The idea is it's something called the Battle Within. We're trying to help with veteran suicide. You know, some of us will be sitting on it, and if somebody is having bad thoughts, particularly veterans, we'll talk to them. But if you can be there for that, that would be great. And I think that's all I have for Ward 5. Take it away.
Council Morocco.
At this time, I don't have anything. The only thing I can say is I'm getting a lot of repeat. People calling me and repeating about yard cleanups and things like that. We report them, and I get repeat calls saying, you know, they're asking me when to respond, and I guess I don't know how to answer them, because I put them in myself, plus they put them in.
Yeah. Yeah, so debris cleanup is an additional responsibility of DPW on top of everything else. And so when we have repeated storms, debris cleanup is not always the top priority when we're doing all the other pieces. So it comes into a piece of it all. And when we get those repeats, we try to remedy it with as quickly as possible.
Well, some of these aren't just debris. We're talking about like dilapidated houses not being looked at, code violations.
Oh, yeah. That all goes
Code
through the code
violations.
process.
I've made repeated completes, and we haven't got anything back from them.
Yeah.
Those are the type of things I'm hearing from my work.
Okay, we can look into them. I do want everyone to realize when you put a code violation in, sometimes that process can take many months before you can see any remedy, and sometimes it can take years as it goes through the process.
I talked about that with no, you. We were gonna go down and talk with, I can't remember the people's name. No, the council, or the, come on, help me out.
Supervisor? No. I'm trying to remember this, basically, if I could take over for a minute, we did talk about it, and there was, I know the code as far as the, what?
What's the?
Somebody that's a city employee?
No, the legislator there.
Oh, Assemblyman Gallagher.
Assemblyman, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
They-
geez, I can't remember.
Gone.
We, like I said, we plan on going and talking to him because with the rules and stuff when it comes to the code violations and stuff like this, the order process, I want to go down and speak with him to get the exact rulings how it is. Maybe we can do something legislative to change the state laws because it makes, there's a lot of pressure on the city, and the city's hands seem to be bound and tied. I try to explain that to my constituents,
Yeah, it's
and they
frustrating.
don't understand it because our hands are tied here in the city.
Yeah.
So
Would that be helpful?
one comment, and as Council Petropoulos knows from his time in the service, is usually a chain of command and good communication takes place for positive benefits. So my recommendation, if you want to look at how state legislature impacts our code or our ability to enforce code, will be first to touch base with staff and code and get specific information that you would like to address, and they might even be able to cite state legislature that we would want to reach out to our, not only our state assemblyman, but our state senator, and if we wanted to try to address state laws and regulations. But I would suggest going well educated before you have that conversation. All set, Councilor Morocco?
Yep.
Okay, Councilor Whitfield.
It is imperative for the people to vote. I say that it is imperative for the people to vote because they need to make wise decisions on the people they vote for. Tonight is an example to the reason why people should make a wise vote. I think that looking at the issues pertaining to the budget, I say this with all due respect. Anyone that is in approval of the budget is not for the people. This is why I say that people should make a wise vote. At the end of the day, we have people, as I stated earlier, who are middle classmen who feel it is an uproar that the budget is the way it is going to be in 2025. So that leaves it to be the lower class people, who is quite the majority considering in Geneva. They will suffer. They will suffer from this decision. In other news, the recreation department will be hosting their Halloween parade October 27th, which is a Sunday. October 14th will be the 7th annual Touch a Truck Day, which is Monday, October 14th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The parade will be October 27th. The parade line will form at 3:30 p.m. in front of the Army on Main Street. And that'll be all for today.
Thank you. Council Petropoulos.
Yes, Councilor Whitfield, do you know what the parade route is other than warming up the Army?
I'm not sure. It doesn't say that. They gave me the flyer to present. Also, one more statement, and this is also the reason why the people feels that when we make certain decisions, the people feel that they cannot talk to council because issues like this that arise. We have a lot of oppressed people who feel as though they shouldn't vote at all because they feel that they aren't being heard. And for years we've been arguing about taxes and hearing that it's going to be rising. Like I always say, it's going to be pushing people out of Geneva. And it's sad that it has to come this way. And all I can see is that there is one kind of people that this budget will be for, and it's not the majority of people in the city of Geneva.
All set, Councilor?
Yeah.
Great. I'd like to welcome back our comptroller. It's nice to see him sitting over there, familiar face, and very efficient person to be back on our staff. So thank you very much, Adam, for being there. And I'd like to thank everybody that went to our 9/11 ceremony. It was well attended. Our first responders were there in force. It's always an emotional day, and it was great to have that level of turnout. Senator Helming was there. She didn't send her husband this time. It was nice, and we really had a really good ceremony. It was a great turnout, so thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's Councilor Peeler, seconded by Councilor Petropoulos. All in